Good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here for the board meeting. I would like to call the meeting to order at 9:11 a.m. I ask that as a courtesy to all, please ensure that you've silenced your cell phones. Also, I'd like to remind our directors to turn their microphones on and off each time they speak to help with the audio and video recordings. Where is Scott? There you go. Okay. Let me first start by acknowledging and expressing my gratitude to Director Dave Scott. His service as presiding officer from December 2011 to February 2019 has been a great service to the board and the state of Texas. Thank you, Dave, for your leadership, and now as you continue to support our board of directors on the Brazos River Authority. Thank you.
I'd like to say I wish you all the luck.
I noticed they have you real close to me, so that way.
I'm right here.
Okay. I would also like to thank the directors that served with Dave Scott, that retired from the board this year. Directors Chris Adams, Robert Christian, Jean Grant, Henry Munson, and Carolyn Johnson, who, by the way, served the board from 2001 to 2019. We would personally like to thank them, and will do so at a service event this summer. Now, I would like to introduce our new board members. So as I call your name, if you would just raise your hand so everybody can acknowledge you. Director Judy Crone, PhD from Round Rock. Director Crone brings her dedication and enthusiasm to the board after a long career in education, training, and professional development. Welcome. Director Jan Henderson from Georgetown. Director Henderson brings a wealth of project, construction, engineering knowledge to the board from her role at M&S Engineering. Welcome, Jen. Director Tracy LaChance from Danbury. Director LaChance brings production and manufacturing's best practices and inventory management from her role at Rice Tech Incorporated. Welcome, Tracy. Director Royce Leslie from Comanche. Director Leslie owns and operates his family farm and ranch, bringing us land management experience. Director Alan Sanderson from Sugar Land. Director Sanderson brings financial and COE knowledge as a CPA and former Texas Army National Guard Corps of Engineer officer. Welcome, Alan. Director Wayne Wilson from Bryan. Director Wilson owns and operates Wilson Cattle Company and also serves on the Brazos G Regional Water Planning Group, bringing a wealth of land and water knowledge to our board. Welcome. There you are. I am glad to welcome you, new directors, to the board, and know that you will continue to contribute greatly to the leadership and future direction of the Brazos River Authority as we maintain, manage, and plan our future water needs for our Texas citizens. As we move forward in the meeting with the notice of meeting acknowledgement, I can announce that the public meeting notice was properly posted as required by law. The notice of this board meeting was received by each of the directors. As for attendance and announcements, Directors Rankin, Smith, and Tallis indicated that they would not be present at this meeting. We now have reached the portion of our meeting where we have set aside time to hear from you, the general public. Those of you who are interested in providing comments, please fill out one of the cards available at the reception desk, and we will call you to approach the podium to make your comments at this time. We encourage you to speak your mind and tell us your thoughts. Be mindful, however, that the board is limited by provisions of the Open Meetings Act and the ability to participate in discussions or deliberations on issues that are not posted in the meeting's agenda. The first public comment is from Jeannie Grant, our recently retired director. Jean?
I'll try the microphone. And I'll follow my notes so that I don't talk too long. Some of the new board members know I can talk a while. So first I wanted to come and be here today because I won't be able to be here in July for the alumni celebration that they typically have. But I felt it was important to come, and I'm so impressed with this new group of directors, so well-rounded, the choices, and from different locations throughout the basin. Can you hear me? Okay, good. Thank the staff. Amazing staff. I'm not going to name names, but I'm going to list some things here. The departments, all these departments have worked together to make a great team over the last 14 years that I've served. There have been a lot of changes in regulations, and more changes in regulations, changes in the water board, the Water Development Board, all of our partners have had changes. Therefore, this staff has to adjust daily to all kinds of changes. So they've done a great job doing that. Our tech managers, they do a great job. Our folks out in the field, our basin managers, and the people who support them. They're just amazing. You'll learn that over time. It's taken a lot of people to make this River Authority the success that it is. I'm always impressed with our legal counsel and also how our human resources department works with staff. And it's just interesting how complicated some of these departments have to be because of the constant changes in policy from the state and the federal government and other partners. And so I don't want to forget the communications people in the IT department. If it weren't for the IT department, we wouldn't be up and running this morning. And I understand. And also, our communications department. They've done a great job. And if you've seen our website, that's just one indication of how much they've improved over the years, of course, with all the technology that's available. And that has really helped the Brazos River Authority let the communities we serve know what really is going on at the Brazos River Authority and how things are totally out in the open. I want to thank the support staff here at the central office. They're amazing. I don't see all of them here today, of course, but thank you. They do such a good job, and especially those who help the directors. We've got great leadership. You've had great leadership for the last 16, 17 years, and it's a really first-class organization. I want to thank the environmental staff. That's another area where if they were not on top of the environmental situation, that is a real tough subject to deal with, and they always help prepare the staff for whatever eventuality. So it's a great team. Our financial folks do a great job. So let me just say that I feel honored, and it has been a pleasure to serve with these folks. And it's also been an honor to serve with the directors, great people from throughout the basin who have done such a good job of helping the staff and maybe also learning from the staff. So, and now you have a wonderful, relatively new CEO, so I'll be watching, and I'll be really excited about the creative and wonderful advances, for example, on Allen's Creek Systems Ops, but then there's so many other things that are going on that people will learn if they read the website, and the directors will learn over time. So thank you. Thank you, everybody. It's been an honor and a pleasure.
Now we will move on to our first agenda item. Report and possible discussion on General Manager CEO report by David Collingsworth, General Manager CEO.
Thank you, Chairman, and let me probably be the last in the room to congratulate you on your new appointment.
Thank you.
And we look forward to your leadership and all the skills and expertise that you bring to the BRA. So thank you. So if, for you new ones, if you're looking at the agenda and you're wondering if this is a normal agenda or not, it's really not. It's really quite long. But a quite long agenda means progress. And what's on the agenda is years of initiatives coming together, allowing us to move some very large projects forward today, like the Bell House Pipeline. We're going to talk to you also about the System Operations Permit. 15 years of developing water, but we're really close to providing over 100,000 acre-feet of water to the state of Texas for less than $30 million. And I challenge any water purveyor in the state of Texas to find and provide that much water for that cheap of price. So in that aspect, I think today is going to be very monumental in the history of the BRA as we provide more water available to those that need it as we continue to grow. Secondly, let me take a minute just to say happy birthday to Ford Taylor. It's Ford's birthday. We're not going to sing. And third, and this will take just a minute or two, but I'd like to ask Kyle Lewis to come up front, please. I need some extra security here, Kyle. Yep, you. The gentleman that's approaching us from my right is a very interesting guy and a great American and a great person. And if you've been around Granbury, he's helped you or he's helped people that you know, and he is a wonderful asset. Stay right there. Stay right there. The folks that I'm fixing to bring over are his son, Casey, his wife, Samantha, and his daughter, Rebecca. Thank you all for being here today. This is very important. I want to read something to you because I don't want to mess it up. Kyle is a lake ranger. How long have you been with the BRA?
16 years.
16 years. But it was everything got very interesting on the afternoon of January 28th at 7:30 when Kyle Lewis was driving home, and he was the first upon an auto accident that had just happened. And what he found was a 17-year-old female from Mineral Wells who was unresponsive with no pulse, and EMS had not even been notified yet. He immediately began CPR. First responders at the scene said, without a doubt, his CPR saved that young lady's life. Kyle Lewis's quote, when asked, he said, "I just pumped and prayed." How about that? As she started to come to, she simply grabbed his wrist to thank him. How about that? I am standing next to a true hero. Ladies and gentlemen, Kyle Lewis. So what we've done is we've ordered Kyle a memento for his office and one to display at Lake Granbury. And Kyle, it's not in today, but here's what it reads. The Brazos River Authority thanks Kyle Lewis, Lake Granbury Ranger, for his outstanding contributions to the community as the first Heart of the Brazos River Authority recipient, April 2019. Thank you, sir. Great job. So as our past director, Jeannie Grant, just said, when you think of BRA being first class, it's because of guys like this. Thank you very much. Congratulations. Chairman, Mike and family, we'd like a photo op real fast, if that's okay with y'all. Come over here in front of the American flag, please. We can tell at school. I know we got You did good. You did good.
All right. Look at me. 1, 2, 3.
All right. Thank you all very much. with that, Chairman, I'll turn the program back over to you.
Agenda item 2, discussion and possible. Agenda item number 2, discussion and possible action on Lifeguard Your Child proclamation by Michael McClendon, Upper Basin Regional Manager.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the board. With this presentation, I'm going to be recommending that the board adopt a proclamation from Cook Children's Hospital. Our Lake Granbury Project Office, as you can see with these pictures here, held our first Water Safety Awareness Day at one of our public use areas in Granbury back in 2016. The goal is to provide free life jackets to children within the community. Each year, that event has grown over the last 4 years. The 4th annual event is actually scheduled for this May. We anticipate handing out over 200 life jackets. We have about 30 different agencies participating and volunteers and helping us put this on. And I can't thank the Granbury staff enough, the men and women. Kyla Lewis is one of them, Connie Tucker. They do a tremendous job putting this event on. All right, there we go. So following the success of the events that we've had, Cook's Children's Hospital asked us to spearhead a local committee to share resources and ideas on water safety and drowning prevention. With Cook's Children's support, the meetings brought together a wide array of participants, included first responders, civic organizations, churches, the city of Granbury, Hood County, and several other entities, including the private sector businesses. So in conjunction with our 4th annual meeting coming up here in May, Cook's has requested the BRA adopt a proclamation to promote water safety and drowning initiatives. I do have a representative. I'll recognize her. I have Dana Walraven with us today. She's with Cook's Children's, if you'll raise your hand. So she's been instrumental in spearheading this effort with us. The proclamation, it aligns with BRA public outreach efforts in our communities, and our staff strongly supports adoption of this proclamation. The city of Granbury and Hood County are also adopting similar proclamations here in the coming weeks. So I do have a proclamation for your consideration.
At this time, I'd like to read the proclamation. Whereas Texas is a leading state for child pool drownings, and drowning is the leading cause of accidental death for children ages 1 to 4 across the nation. Whereas it only takes seconds for a drowning to occur, and it is imperative that adults not be distracted when they are designated adults watching children while near or in water. Whereas our children need to be protected by caring adults and have their safety ensured. We, as all parents and caregivers, to lifeguard your child when they are near water or in water. Whereas the Lifeguard Your Child campaign is an initiative of Safe Kids North Texas led by Cook's Children's Healthcare System, put into place to help prevent further child injury and death. Lifeguard Your Child is being implemented across our Brazos River Basin by first responders and law enforcement officers. Whereas the goal of increased awareness and understanding by caregivers, policymakers, and the public at large regarding possible dangers around all water environments will aid in the prevention of further child deaths in the Brazos River Basin from drowning. And whereas engaging the Brazos River Authority as a partner with Safe Kids North Texas in the Lifeguard Your Child regional campaign increases the reach of this year's effort to provide ongoing education and awareness to protect children from drowning by implementing strategies such as water watcher tag use, preschool education, pool ordinance updates, U.S. Coast Guard approved life jacket use, access to water safety lessons, and other layers of protection. It is for this cause that the Brazos River Authority has joined other local agencies to advocate for drowning prevention, education, awareness, and support for the communities of the Brazos River Basin. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Cynthia Flores, presiding officer of the Brazos River Authority, and we, the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority, do by proclaim the month of May as Lifeguard Your Child Month, and urge all citizens to support the effort to prevent further needless child deaths from drowning. You've heard the reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? Okay, so do me a favor. So, because we have some new members, if you will say your name so that way we can get it on the record.
John Luton.
And who was the second? Jen Henderson. A motion has been made by John Henry Luton and a second by Jen Henderson. Please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores,
Aye? Yes.
Director Bell,
Yes.
Director Zaccanino,
Yes.
Director Ball,
Yes.
Director Bennett,
Yes.
Director Henderson. Yes. Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Crum. Yes. Director LaChance,
Yes.
Director Lattimore,
Yes.
Director Leslie,
Yes.
Director Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Luton,
Yes.
Director Sanderson,
Yes.
Director Scott,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Wilson,
Yes.
At this time, we will take a 5-minute recess. We resume back in open session at 9:41 a.m. Item number 3, discussion and possible action on Belton Lake, Stillhouse Hollow Lake Raw Water Transfer System, Engineering Services by Brad Brunette, Central and Lower Basin Regional Manager.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. This is an action item where we're going to be asking for your authorization to move forward with an engineering contract for this project that we've been looking at for quite some time now. I've got just a couple of slides here that with maps to kind of, I guess, show you exactly what we're talking about before we get into some of the specifics here. This is what we've referred to historically as our Bell House project. We probably briefed this project to you maybe 5 or 8 times over the last 15 years since it was conceptualized back 15 to 20 years ago. What it's going to entail is a relatively short pipeline from Lake Belton to Stillhouse Hollow, 6 miles, maybe a little bit longer depending on the ultimate route that's selected. Also an intake structure in Lake Belton where the water would be pumped out of the lake, and a discharge structure in Lake Stillhouse Hollow. So those are the elements of what we're talking about. Just a little bit more of a zoomed out view here. You can see on this map the existing Williamson County Regional Raw Water Line that moves water from Stillhouse Hollow down to Lake Georgetown. And with this connection of Belton to Stillhouse Hollow Lake, we'll actually be linking 5 of our reservoirs together. We would have 3 of them linked together with the pipelines being Belton, Stillhouse, and Georgetown. But if you look further upstream above Lake Belton, Lake Proctor is on the Leon River, and so all the water from Lake Proctor ultimately ends up in Lake Belton. And then you can see on the lower portion of the map, Lake Granger is downstream of Lake Georgetown, so all the water that flows out of Lake Georgetown ends up in Granger. So it would essentially link 5 of our reservoirs together in this part of the basin. The need for the project. We've been planning for this again for probably 15 to 20 years. We've got growing water needs from customers at Stillhouse Hollow. Our customers that take water there, their demands are increasing. And there are really kind of 2 main drivers that are driving the time frame on this project of us needing to move forward now. First of all, Bell County WCID number 1, who is our largest municipal water customer. They have a water treatment plant at Lake Belton and currently divert all of their water at Lake Belton and treat it at that plant there. And then they supply treated water to a number of communities in that Lake Belton, Stillhouse Hollow area. Their needs have been growing, and they started construction on a new water treatment plant down at Lake Stillhouse Hollow several years ago, and that plant is supposed to come online in 2020. And so when it does, Bell County WCID number 1 will be shifting some of their demands off of Lake Belton and onto Lake Stillhouse Hollow. And then as we go through time, those demands there will be increasing that they'll be supplying from Stillhouse Hollow. The other thing is we've got the pipeline that I showed you a moment ago that runs from Lake Stillhouse Hollow down to Lake Georgetown. We have one more phase of pumping capacity to add to that pipeline. That will be phase 3. And our demands down at Lake Georgetown are increasing such that we're looking at needing to add that additional pumping capacity there sometime probably in the next 3 to 5 years. We've actually, I think, got some money tentatively programmed for next year's budget to start engineering work on those phase 3 pumps. So those are kind of the two main drivers that are going to increase our demands there at Stillhouse Hollow. Again, this project will give us some redundancy. It'll give us the capability to help supplement needs at Stillhouse Hollow from Lake Belton. The pipeline won't run all the time, so it's not going to be a situation where once we build this pipeline, it's going to be on all the time. It'll only be running whenever we have dry conditions and we need to supplement Stillhouse Hollow, kind of the way that we operate the existing pipeline from Stillhouse to Georgetown today. It's also a recommended water management strategy in the last 2 Brazos G and state water plans, so the project's kind of been on the books for over 10 years or so with regard to the regional water planning world. Just a little bit of history, kind of where we started and where we are now. We had some long-term water that was available for sale 15 to 20 years ago, and as a matter of fact, until today, we've got another item for you on our system operations permit water. This was the last time that we had any significant quantity of water available on a long-term basis 15 to 20 years ago. We ultimately entered new long-term contracts for that water. It was about 35,000 acre feet with diversion points at Lake Belton and Stillhouse Hollow. And at the time the board authorized those sales 15 years or so ago, there was the understanding that we would need this additional infrastructure at some point in the future to make good on those contracts. So this project has, again, been on the books, and we're going to need it to satisfy the needs now that we've gone through time and our demands there are growing. Just back in the 2009 to 2015 timeframe, some of you may recall that we've worked quite a bit with Bell County WCID number 1 to look at sharing infrastructure. They have an existing intake structure in Lake Belton, and there was some thought that we might be able to partner with them and use their structure and just add additional pumping capacity to save ourselves from having to construct a new intake structure at Lake Belton. We evaluated that and worked with them on that for several years. Ultimately, the site layout there and the tolerances with the pump cans on their infrastructure kind of made it a little bit iffy whether or not we could do that. I think technically, if everything was built like it shows on the plans is out there today, that we probably could, but I think there was going to be some risk there with construction if we partnered with them. Also, what we found out ultimately was that the cost savings that we were looking at weren't as large as what we thought they might be. I think the estimate of our savings, if we built our own intake structure versus partnering with the district, was somewhere in the $5 to $8 million. And while that's not a small sum of money relative to the overall size of the project, it's not that large. And again, I think there's some risk there with regard to us using that infrastructure. The other thing, I think, probably several years ago when we briefed the board about this project and we were exploring that partnership, there was some concern among the board about us not being in control and owning that infrastructure. The path that we were looking at was having some type of operations agreement with the district where they would own the infrastructure and we would just have an agreement with them to transfer the water for us. So there was some concern over that. And as a result, for about the last 3 years, we've kind of stepped back and reassessed this project as a standalone project where we would, basically pursue looking at a new intake structure on Lake Belton on our own end. We do have in the scope of work that we're proposing a lot of coordination with the district, so there may still be some opportunities to partner with them with some of the pipeline easements and right-of-way that they may already have. So we're not, totally turning away from that option, but we are looking in a different direction to actually being the owner and operator of the system. We've been monitoring our water needs over the last several years too. And right now we're estimating that we need to have the pipeline online and constructed by 2025 or thereabouts. The recent cost estimates for the project range from $40 to $50 million. So that's the total cost estimated for the intake structure at Belton, the pipeline, and then the outfall structure at Stillhouse Hollow. We published a request for proposals late in 2018 to procure engineering services to help us move the project forward. We ended up receiving 5 proposals. We had a selection committee here at BRA that reviewed those and narrowed it down to the top 3. And then we brought those 3 firms in for interviews. Of those 3 firms, we're recommending that we contract with Walker Partners team for phase 1 of this project. And when I'm talking about phase 1, we're really talking about the project alternatives evaluation and preliminary engineering design. So there's quite a bit of alternatives work that we're going to have to do in coordination with the Corps of Engineers to make sure that we end up selecting a site and designing a project that they're actually going to allow us to build. So that's a substantial portion of the work for this first phase of this project. We actually have 3 representatives from Walker Partners here with us today. We have Jed Walker, John Linder, and Aaron Archer. Y'all may wave over there. We've been working with them on the scope of work and the contract for the last several months. We've got we've negotiated the contract and the scope starting probably back in December and have got that in place where we as a staff here feel comfortable moving forward with them. The fee for this phase 1 work is about $2.7 million, and we're recommending authorization to execute that contract and move forward and begin the work. Just a little bit about our selection of Walker Partners, kind of why we ended up selecting them. Their proposal and also in their interview, they demonstrated the depth of their understanding of this project. It's more than just a concrete and steel type project. There are substantial technical and engineering challenges to it, but there's also a significant amount of regulatory and agency coordination that we're going to have to deal with in coordinating with the Corps of Engineers and permitting and those types of things. There's also going to be a fairly significant political and public relations effort associated with this project, and nobody likes seeing a pipeline built from a lake that they live around because that means the water may go somewhere else. And so that's something that we deal with everywhere, but no doubt we'll be dealing with that issue here. And then one other thing with the Walker Partners proposal that really stood out was their consideration of operational requirements. In their proposal and in the interview, they were looking ahead not only at what we need to build now, but long-term, how we might operate it, what energy costs might look like, and how we might design and size the infrastructure up front to minimize the overall cost down the line with our operations. And that was something that really stood out with their proposal. They've got some very relevant project experience in the area here, a good local knowledge of the area. I think they've got 3 offices locally here, and one in Waco, Killeen, and one in Austin. Been working with a lot of our customers in that area. And Aaron Archer is actually the project manager on a very similar project that they're working on for the Brushy Creek Regional Utility Authority down south of us. That's an authority that consists of Cedar Park, Leander, and Round Rock. They've recently built a new water treatment plant down there, and Walker Partners is working on the design of a new deep water intake structure at Lake Travis for them. So very relevant, very recent experience, and that's all led to our recommendation of moving forward with them. I think this is the last slide I have. I have a resolution, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you've got. Yes. Yes, sir.
Mike, $50 million for 6 miles of pipeline sounds awfully expensive to me. Is that comparable to other costs?
It is. In looking at the regional water plan, we're talking about the intake structure is probably the most significant element of the cost. The pipeline itself is maybe second, and then the discharge structure at Stillhouse Hollow. But again, when you look at numbers in the regional water plans, we've got estimates in there for this project that were done several years ago that were originally, I think, at $32 million, and then the last regional water plan, they were at $38 million. We've also had a couple of other firms evaluate this project on a cost basis for us, and like I said, the numbers that we're seeing range from 40 to 50 million. And these guys here that are working on this project for LCRA can tell you that that's the world that we live in with something like this. Yes, sir.
The cost of the engineering fees, are they budgeted in this current year?
Yes, we have, I think, over $1 million in this year's budget, and we also have money programmed in next year's budget for this project as well.
Based on this quote?
Yes, sir.
Brad,
Yes.
what is this is one single pipeline?
Yes, sir, that's the plan. We're actually going to look at phasing. That's another thing in this preliminary alternatives to see if, there's any logic to, maybe building a smaller pipeline and a larger one later. I don't know that that will be what we do, but it could potentially be more than one, but most likely one.
What is the general, I mean, they haven't engineered it, but size-wise, estimate range, how big a pipeline is it?
Chuck, were we looking at 36 or 48 inch, something like that?
Big one.
Yeah, pretty large pipe. And one of the things, we're going to have them, as part of this evaluation, verify the timing of need, the sizing of the infrastructure. But in our work on it as a staff here and over the last 15 years or so as we've been developing this project, we're looking at a maximum annual quantity of somewhere around 30,000 acre feet per year, maybe a little bit more, that we would move through it. The timing of how fast we have to move it comes into play with the sizing of the infrastructure, but that's about the volume of water that we're looking at. And Lake Belton, for perspective, holds about 450,000 acre feet of water. Any other questions?
Read the resolution, please.
Yes, ma'am. Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager/CEO to negotiate and execute a professional services agreement with Walker Partners LLC for Phase 1 of the Belton Lake to Stillhouse Hollow Lake raw water transfer system engineering services for an amount not to exceed $2,665,867.
You've heard the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved. Richard.
Second.
Richard and,
Motion was made by Rick Huber, second by Christian.
Richard Ball. Richard Ball.
Richard Ball. Please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores.
Yes?
Director Bell.
Yes.
Director Zacanino.
Yes.
Director Ball.
Yes.
Director Bennis.
Yes.
Director Henderson.
Yes.
Director Huber.
Yes.
Director Crone.
Yes.
Director LaChance.
Yes.
Director Lattimore.
Yes.
Director Leslie.
Yes.
Director Lloyd.
Yes.
Director Luton.
Yes.
Director Sanderson.
Yes.
Director Scott.
Yes.
Director Taylor.
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
Item number 4, discussion and possible action on water supply rule by Matt Phillips, Legislative and Governmental Affairs Manager.
Madam Chair and members, the Corps of Engineer water supply rule is an issue that we've talked to you all a little bit about before. A couple of years ago, now it's been probably a couple of years back, the Corps of Engineers proposed a set of rules for how they manage and allocate and account for water supply that's stored in their federal reservoirs. And as an entity that stores a little over half of our water supply in the 8 Corps of Engineer reservoirs that are in our system, it's obviously something that we have to watch and be very concerned about what those changes might be. Our interpretation of what those rules would do and how they would apply to the water that we store in Corps of Engineer reservoirs is not good. The way that we look at it, it would give the Corps way too much of a hand in the allocation of state water, which we feel is a state function. It would essentially give them their own water rights accounting and allocation system, which the state of Texas already does. We don't need another set of eyes or a set of hands on how water is allocated at the state level. The best example that we usually give is the Lake Whitney example. Right now, water stored in Lake Whitney that's sitting there now is split between us and the Southwest Power Administration on a 20% BRA, 80% SWAPA basis. But the way that we interpret this new rule, water that we send downstream from Possum Kingdom that passes through Whitney, that's just by virtue of the fact that it's passing through the reservoir, would have that 80-20 split applied to it. Now, obviously, that's a problem. I'm not a math whiz, but I'm pretty sure that means we lose 80% of our water by virtue of the fact that we pass it through the core reservoir. So that's an issue. Other entities like us have similar issues with the rule. If you look at the city of Dallas, they store a lot of return flows, wastewater flows, in the core reservoir, and so similar allocation splits would happen to theirs. So they obviously view it as problematic. We spent a good deal of time working against the rules. We submitted detailed comments back when they first had the comment period. The rules actually been delayed for implementation twice, so some of the work that we and others have done in fighting it has at least yielded some results in that it's delayed it. But we do think that the Corps is still looking at a potential finalization date of this rule sometime in August. We can't really get a straight answer out of them if they're going to finalize it in August. We've met with them, and they give us some really confusing, kind of pointing both directions. We don't really know what we're going to do. Other entities, like I said, have also worked against the rule. You look at the City of Dallas, Tarrant Regional Water District, Trinity River Authority. David and I went to D.C., met with several members of our congressional delegation. I want to say that was back in sometime last year. And got a lot of support for the problems with it. So we've at least made our congressional delegation aware of the problems that we see with the rule. But what we're trying to do now is engage in an additional effort with some of these other entities like Dallas and Tarrant and Trinity River Authority and the Texas Water Conservation Association to put together a letter that will be signed by the entire Texas congressional delegation stating opposition to the rule, hoping that they'll either continue to delay it, kill it altogether, do something other than implement it. This is one of those situations where the Corps was looking to address issues in other parts of the country, but they could not, at least according to them, they cannot fashion a rule that only applies to those areas of the country. That's a blanket one-size-fits-all rule. For states that don't have established water rights procedures, this rule might make sense, but we already have it. So we're putting together this letter effort, and each individual entity is attempting to adopt a resolution by their governing body, which would be the board, stating opposition to the rule, which would be attached to that letter. That would go to the Corps, and we're going to see if we can either get the rule delayed again or get it killed altogether. Another effort that we're undertaking is to try to get language in the next federal appropriations bill that prohibits the Corps from funding any efforts to implement the rule. That's a tactic that you tend to use if you can't stop the rule itself. You try to get language in the appropriations bill that basically says you can adopt a rule, but you can't have any funding to implement it. So it's another effort. We'll see if that's successful. So I've got a resolution. It's going to be not in our typical template. It was drafted by the folks over at TRA, but it's one that we're all trying to adopt. So be happy to answer any questions.
Please read the resolution.
Okay. A resolution requesting that the United States Army Corps of Engineers rescind its use of reservoir projects for domestic, municipal, and industrial water supply rulemaking and enter into consultation with non-federal interests. Whereas the Brazos River Authority is the local sponsor of Lakes Whitney, Aquila, Proctor, Belton, Stillhouse Hollow, Georgetown, Granger, and Somerville, which are owned and operated by for the Brazos River Authority, benefit by the United States Army Corps of Engineers, USACHI, and whereas the Brazos River Authority has entered into contracts with the municipal, industrial, and agricultural water users in the Brazos Basin, under which the Brazos River Authority is committed to supply water from those reservoirs and others to those users, and whereas as a condition of its admission and annexation to the United States, retained exclusive ownership of the water of the ordinary flow, underflow tides, and every flowing river, natural stream, and lake, and the stormwater, floodwater, and rainwater of every river, natural stream, and watershed as property of the state, and whereas Texas holds its right in surface water in trust for the benefit of Texans and has conferred those rights upon the Brazos River Authority, and whereas the Brazos River Authority has invested significant capital to make use of the state-owned resource, and whereas the Flood Control Act of 1944, PL 78534, and the Water Supply Act of 1958, PL 85500, reflect the unequivocal congressional intent that USACHI shall not apply those acts in a manner that interferes with the exclusive rights of the states in determining the development of watersheds within their borders, the state's interest and rights of water utilization and control, and the state's primary responsibility and authority to develop water supplies for domestic, municipal, industrial, and other purposes. And whereas in direct response to disputes arising in the Apalachicola, Chattahoochee, Flint, Alabama, Coosa, Tallapoosa, and Missouri River Basins, and on December 16, 2016, the USACHI proposed rules entitled Use of U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Reservoir Projects for Domestic, Municipal, Industrial Water Supply, more commonly referred to as the Water Supply Rule, and Whereas the water supply rule, while intended to resolve disputes of limited geographic concern, would be nationwide in scope. Whereas the disputes motivating the water supply rule's proposal are a function of their intrastate nature and the failure of the involved parties to cooperate in their resolution. And whereas the water supply rule preamble states that USACHE does not believe the proposed rule has federalism implications. And whereas proposals in the water supply rule preamble indicate an intent by USACHE to apply the rule in a fashion inconsistent with the Brazos River Authority's rights to use state-owned water granted to it by the state of Texas. And whereas the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality and many political subdivisions affected by the proposed water supply rule have commented and urged USACHE to withdraw the rule proposal. And whereas in order to protect Texas sovereignty over its state-owned water and the rights granted therein to the Brazos River Authority, it is imperative USACHE withdraw its proposed water supply rule and engage in meaningful consultation with the states and non-federal interests to develop a new proposal that adequately reflects the mandates of federalism contained in both the Flood Control Act of 1944 and the Water Supply Act of 1958. Now therefore be it resolved, the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority, that the Brazos River Authority hereby expresses its grave concern that the water supply rule may, according to its preamble, be applied by the USACHE as a basis to allocate rights to surface water owned by the state of Texas, and B, that the Brazos River Authority urges USACHE to withdraw its proposed water supply rule, and C, that subsequent to said withdrawal, requests that USACHE engage in statutorily mandated consultation with the state of Texas and its affected non-federal sponsors regarding water supply accounting in federally owned reservoirs in Texas, and be it further resolved that an official copy of this resolution will be prepared for the Assistant Secretary of the Army Civil Works, USACHE, as an expression of sentiment of the Brazos River Authority.
Next.
We have all heard the reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? Okay, very good. Judy. Motion was made by Judy Crone and second by Dave Scott. Call for vote, please, then.
Presiding Officer Flores,
Yes.
Director Bell,
Yes.
Director Zaganino,
Yes.
Director Ball,
Yes.
Director Bennis,
Yes.
Director Henderson,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Crone,
Yes.
Director LaChance,
Yes.
Director Lattimore,
Yes.
Director Leslie,
Yes.
Director Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Luton,
Yes.
Director Sanderson,
Yes.
Director Scott,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Wilson,
Yes.
We will now enter into executive session at 10:07 a.m. The Board of Directors will conduct a closed meeting and executive session on the following matters: to deliberate the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property in Grayson County pursuant to the authority granted by Section 551.072 of the Texas Open Meetings Act, codified as Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code. B, to deliberate regarding the following positions: General Manager/CEO, Technical Services Manager, Chief Financial Officer, Human Resource Manager, General Counsel, Legislative and Government Affairs Manager, Upper Basin Regional Manager, Central and Lower Basin Regional Manager, Information Technology Manager, and Planning and Development Manager, Water Services Manager, Records Management Officer, Environmental and Compliance Manager, and Senior Maintenance Worker pursuant to the authority granted by Section 551.074, the Texas Open Meetings Act, codified by Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code. If you are not specifically involved in the presentation of the first executive session item, please excuse yourself from the boardroom at this time. With each executive session agenda item, time will be allowed to clear the boardroom and call the next presenters. We ask that the public please wait in the break room in order to keep the hallways clear until the executive session is finished. The Board of Directors hereby reconvenes into open session at 11:31 a.m. Is there a resolution for the board to consider? Go ahead.
Would you like to hear it?
Yes, please read the resolution.
Still not on.
Okay. Be it resolved by the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority that the sustained exemplary performance by the General Manager, CEO warrants an ECI inflation and merit pay increase and justifies recognition and acknowledgement for a one-time pay bonus of $25,000. Provided in the budget for BRA employees, our CEO and General Manager's current salary is $250,000. The inflation increase, or the ECI increase, is 2.4% at $6,000. And his merit pay increase is 5%, or $12,656. And so therefore be it resolved by the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority that the sustained exemplary performance by the General Manager and CEO warrants an annual salary increase of $18,656 and justifies a one-time transition bonus of $25,000 in recognition and acknowledgement of a job well done.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? Yes. Motion made by Rick Huber, second by Richard Ball. Please poll the board. Yes.
Presiding Officer Flores?
Yes.
Director Bell?
Yes.
Director Zaccanino?
Yes.
Director Ball?
Yes.
Director Bennis?
Yes.
Director Henderson?
Yes.
Director Huber?
Yes.
Director Crone?
Yes.
Director LaChance?
Yes.
Director Lattimore?
Yes.
Director Leslie?
Yes.
Director Lloyd?
Yes.
Director Luton?
Yes.
Director Sanderson?
Yes.
Director Scott?
Too many.
Director Taylor?
Yes.
Director Wilson?
Yes.
Congratulations, General
Thank you.
Manager, CEO David Collins. We appreciate all the work you've done this past year. Agenda item number 7, discussion and possible action on drought contingency plan update by Aaron Abel, Water Service Manager.
Morning, Madam Chair, Directors. Let's see if we-
Sometimes it's lonely to sit at the computer.
Okay.
The world of IT.
Uh-huh.
Time for a commercial break.
Did we get it?
I'm not the
You
best
broke the system.
joke teller.
That's right.
Oh, no.
And that really fits well, I think, ethics. I'm watching it. Yeah. Jen, you better watch it. He's the ethics guy.
Okay.
I run the sound system in my church, and it's the same thing. If anything goes wrong, even the pastor just doesn't turn on his mic. Everybody turns around and looks at the booth back here. Like, what's wrong?
You take care of the coffee too.
Yeah, and empty the trash.
That's got to be the big item, hasn't it? Coffee bar.
We got a guy that does, that's his ministry. He custom grinds our coffee, and it's a great blend, and he does the coffee every Sunday. And it's a pretty classy operation.
1 foot? I think we have a coffee pot.
You have a coffee pot. You should come visit our church and drink our coffee, you know. That's the way you
Prior
judge
to
a
that.
church, by their coffee.
Okay. So today we have the drought contingency plan update before you to approve the update and move forward to submit the updated plan to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. I think the full updated plan was provided on diligent for review. A little about drought contingency plans. I know we have some new directors. In order to conserve the available water supply and protect the integrity of the water supply system, we develop specific plans that implements specific recommendations on water use reductions as droughts occur and water stored in reservoirs fall. So the goal of the drought contingency plan is to stretch the available supply as long as possible during drought periods. So we're required to update the plan every 5 years according to Texas Administrative Code and TCQ rules. Our last update was actually completed back in October of 2012, right after the 2011 drought. We wanted to update the plan to incorporate the lessons learned in that drought, and that satisfied the requirements for the TCQ submittal in May of 2014. So the current plan is due May 1st. The plan will be coordinated through the regional water planning process per TCQ rules. So we went through a public comment period required by TCQ. As part of that process, we put a draft of the updated plan on our website on March 22nd, followed by a 30-day period that ended April 22nd. We also sent letter notifications to our customers and the regional water planning groups notifying of the update. We also posted notice on the Secretary of State's office and the Texas Register. We did have some comments, and we addressed those comments, and today the final part of updating the plan is to get approval from the board, and we plan to submit the final plan by May 1st. So some of the proposed changes in this update of the drought contingency plan is updated lake level trigger levels or storage levels that determine when a specific reservoir or group of reservoirs or the system as a whole enter into a certain drought stage. The other thing, we've incorporated the East Williamson County Regional Water System Drought Contingency Plan. In the past, we had operated a separate drought contingency plan for that system. Going forward, we're going to incorporate that plan into one plan going forward. We reference seasonal forecasts from the Texas Water Development Board that are issued by the board as an early drought monitoring tool. So that's referenced in the plan going forward. It's a good tool to have when you're entering droughts and looking at droughts. We also clarified the pro rata curtailment language that's included when we reach stage 4 of the drought contingency plan. So we are maintaining the 4 trigger levels in the updated plan. In the past, we've had 4 different stages of drought stage. The four levels include stage 1 drought watch, which considers the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's drought indices at the Palmer Hydrologic Drought Index and lake level for initiating the first stage of the DCP. And as lake levels decrease and stored water decreases within a drought, additional drought stages come into play, like the stage 2 drought warning, which is a 10% reduction in water use, and then stage 3, 20%, and then the stage 4 the curtailment process. So as we increase or we go into a drought, these stages are entered and the water use reductions are implemented.
This table compares the lake level or storage trigger levels that are within our current plan, which you'll see in the green columns, with the proposed lake level trigger levels in the blue. The first column over here on the left represents the specific reservoir or the subsystem reservoir that you see here. For the system of reservoirs such as the Possum Kingdom, Granbury, Whitney system, the Georgetown Stillhouse system, and then the overall system, those are based on the combined storage of those reservoirs. The values bolded in blue represent trigger levels that did not change from the current plan to the proposed plan. In general, changes within the trigger levels were minor but showed small increases in the trigger levels. So in other words, as we enter into droughts in the future, with the higher trigger levels, we'll enter the drought stages earlier and therefore start water use reductions a little earlier than the previous plan. And then we talked a little bit about the East Williamson County Regional Water System. We are incorporating that into this current plan. The current criteria specific to the East Williamson County Regional Water System for initiation and termination of drought systems. So for East Williamson County, the triggers are based on consumption of treated water and treated production capacity at the water treatment plant at Lake Granger. At Lake Granger, we have a water treatment plant. We treat the water and we distribute to several customers there around the Lake Granger. So going forward, we will maintain one drought contingency plan. And we talked a little bit about the Texas Water Development Board seasonal rainfall forecast. Over the last several years, we've worked with the board on a grant-funded project to develop forecasted May, June, July rainfall. So we're citing the board's seasonal forecast in this updated plan as an information source only. These forecasts for May, June, July rainfall is issued every 2 weeks. The most recent one actually is in April 17th. But May through July rainfall is important because these months are typically the months where we have the highest rainfall totals. And if we don't get the rainfall in the May-June period, a lot of times we'll slip into drought conditions. So it's a way to gauge the rainfall during those months and get an idea of possible drought development within the system. Oh, whoops, I thought we... Yeah, so we received a couple of comments and questions. Those were addressed in the updated plan. So upon approval of the updated plan here today, we'll submit the updated plan to TCQ and the regional water planning groups prior to the May 1st deadline. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Read the resolution.
Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority, that the drought contingency plan as presented at the April 29, 2019 Board of Directors meeting and prepared in conformance with the requirements of the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality is hereby adopted and supersedes the drought contingency plan dated October 29, 2012. And be it further resolved that the General Manager / CEO is directed to submit the adopted Brazos River Authority drought contingency plan to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? A motion was made by Director Huber and a second by Director Henderson. Please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores?
Yes.
Director Bell?
Yes.
Director Zaccanino?
Yes.
Director Ball?
Yes.
Director Dennis?
Yes.
Director Henderson?
Yes.
Director Huber?
Yes.
Director Crum?
Yes.
Director LaChance?
Yes.
Director Lattimore?
Yes.
Director Leslie?
Yes.
Director Lloyd?
Yes.
Director Luton?
Yes.
Director Sanderson?
Yes.
Director Scott?
Yes.
Director Taylor?
Yes.
Director Wilson?
Yes.
Item number 8, discussion and possible action on the water conservation plan updated by Aaron Abel, Water Services Manager.
2 more agenda items with me. So, similar to the drought contingency plan, TCQ rules require BRA to maintain and periodically update the water conservation plan on a 5-year basis, and they require the governing board to adopt the plan. The water conservation plan is separate from the drought contingency plan in that the purpose of the water conservation plan is to promote wise and efficient water use at all times, not just in drought times, but all times. So water conservation does a lot for the water supply system. Some of the things that it does do is it delays expensive capital investments, such as pipelines and water treatment facilities expansions. It delays the need for new or expanded wastewater treatment facilities. It conserves energy, as less water is needed to be treated, pumped, and distributed to the customers. It reduces stream diversions, thereby enhancing water quality, environmental and recreational functions, and it improves water levels in reservoirs. I believe a copy of the proposed water conservation plan was provided to you through Diligent as well. The plan contains information regarding our customers, the water use from our system, water conservation goals, strategies, and activities. And I'll go through a couple of these. I don't have any slides, but we wanted to give you a feel for what we do as far as water conservation. Some of the things as far as the strategies are concerned, for new contracts that are executed or amended or renewed, we require contract holders to develop and implement conservation plans pursuant to TCQ and comply with our own water conservation plan. We have a pretty broad education and public awareness program. We continue to develop and improve our existing water conservation effort, education, and information program. We host what's called the Major Rivers Program. It's an educational program that we go into schools and provide information for school districts to learn about water and conservation. A couple of other things, we maintain a leak protection and detection program for our facilities, for our pipelines and pump stations in the system. We pursue wastewater reuse. Opportunities arise and support for customers to pursue wastewater reuse projects. And environmental leadership policy. I mean, we implement the environmental leadership policy of the basin, and that improves water conservation. Data collection and sharing. We cooperate with federal agencies, state agencies in developing and monitoring water quantity and quality data. We also do from time to time, we'll do a customer highlight on our website where we highlight what water conservation goals are being done by customers. And so that's something that we've been doing over the last couple of years. So we do quite a bit. In this updated plan, what the changes that happened were pretty minor. We had some updates in the water supply system, such as the system operation permit. So that was really the main thing that was updated in the plan. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Read your resolution, please.
Be it resolved by the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority that the Water Conservation Plan, as presented at the April 29, 2019 Board of Directors meeting and prepared in conformance with the requirements of the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, is hereby adopted. And be it further resolved by the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority that this newly adopted Water Conservation Plan supersedes the Water Conservation Plan dated April 28, 2014. And be it further resolved that the General Manager/CEO is directed to submit the adopted Brazos River Authority Water Conservation Plan to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? Who said that? Second. Okay. A motion was made by Director Luton and a second by Director Henderson. Please call the board.
Presiding Officer Flores?
Yes.
Director Bell?
Yes.
Director Zaganita?
Yes.
Director Ball?
Yes.
Director Bennis?
Yes.
Director Henderson?
Yes.
Director Huber?
Yes.
Director Crum?
Yes.
Director LaChance?
Yes.
Director Lattimore? Director Leslie?
Yes.
Director Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Luton,
Yes.
Director Sanderson,
Yes.
Director Scott,
Good job.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Wilson,
Yes.
Discussion and possible action on the Texas Water Development Board Groundwater Surface Water Interaction Study by Aaron Abel, Water Service Manager. This is item number 9.
This item we have before you now is an approval to contribute funds to a groundwater surface water interaction study funded by the Texas Water Development Board, Lower Colorado River Authority, and the Post Oak Savannah Groundwater Conservation District. Both the Lower Colorado River Authority and the board, and the Texas Water Development Board, approached the BRA last fall to gauge interest in possibly being a part of this study. And some of the questions that you may have is, we truly have a limited scientific understanding of how groundwater interacts with surface water and surface water interacts with groundwater. There's a lot of data out there that is lacking that we need improved understanding. So improving the science and advancing the science will improve our understanding of several things. One is surface water rights, groundwater pumping, and the relationship between alluvial aquifers and the river. How does the river flow into the aquifer and vice versa? And then in-stream flows. In-stream flows are flows in the river that are during normal to drier times. And so the interaction between groundwater and surface water will improve our understanding of how in-stream flows change over time and space, really. There's a geologic aspect of the interaction between groundwater and surface water, and that's one of the things that you can see here in this slide. We'll get a little bit more emphasis on the project itself, but this map over on the right shows both the Brazos River here, and then the basin outline in black, and then the Colorado River. The project site for this study is located just upstream of Bastrop, in Bastrop County, and it's located within the Carrizo-Wilcox outcrop. So there's similar geologic aspects that are at this site that can be found in our basin, in Milam and Robertson County. The project goals, basically what's going to happen is there's going to be some instrumentation in the form of groundwater wells adjacent to the river in Bastrop County that will be installed with pressure transducers to measure water level and determine flow rate between the river and the groundwater system there, and depending on hydrologic system. So as the river level comes up, you could imagine water flowing into the aquifer, and then as it goes down, the river level goes down, and vice versa. So getting a better information and data will help on several different ways. The thought is this project could be used to develop scientific methodologies for future studies in other river basins, such as the Brazos. So it's a project that is needed, and it will advance the science. So the benefits include the establishment of data collection and analysis approach to determine groundwater surface water interactions that could be applied elsewhere in the state. Just gaining a better overall understanding of what's occurring in the interactions between the alluvial aquifers and the river, and also possible strategies to help achieve in-stream flow requirements. So today we're asking for authorization to contribute up to $25,000 for the study. Overall, the study cost for this is $160,000, so BRA would be only contributing up to about $25,000. The project is set to initiate shortly and wrap up towards the first part of 2021. So I'll be happy to answer any questions on this.
Read your resolution, please.
Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager/CEO to contribute up to $25,000 to the scope of work of the Texas Water Development Board Groundwater Surface Water Interaction Study to further develop the understanding of the hydrology between groundwater and surface water systems, And be it further resolved that the general manager/CEO is authorized to negotiate and execute any required contracts or interlocal agreements with the Texas Water Development Board that are necessary to facilitate the scope of work.
You've heard the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? Who said that? Director Crone made the first motion, and who seconded?
Second.
Board Taylor. Second by Director Taylor. Please pull the board.
Presiding Officer Flores.
Yes.
Director Bell.
Yes.
Director Zaganino.
Yes.
Director Ball.
Yes.
Director Bennis.
Yes.
Director Henderson.
Yes.
Director Huber.
Yes.
Director Crone.
Yes.
Director LaChance.
Yes.
Director Lattimore.
Yes.
Director Leslie.
Yes.
Director Lloyd.
Yes.
Director Luton.
Yes.
Director Sanderson.
Yes.
Director Scott. Director Taylor.
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
Item number 10, discussion and possible action on Clean Rivers contract amendment for fiscal year 2018-2021 by Tiffany Morgan, Environmental and Compliance Manager.
I'll run through this rather quick because I know I'm standing between you and lunch. This year, our existing contract with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality is due to expire at the end of August. This program supports the Clean Rivers program, which we participate in through the Clean Rivers Act, which was adopted in 1991 and reconfirmed in 97. That essentially requires river authorities to participate in this program. This is the primary water quality and biological data generating program for the state of Texas for federal clean water quality requirements. We also generate 90% of the data that are used in different regulatory actions when they're setting permit limits. We're providing the raw water quality data out there in the basin to help them know what those permits need to have and don't have. Through this program, we do water quality, fish, aquatic insects, habitat assessments throughout our basin. This year, TCQ's come in and they would like to do a contract extension with the Brazos River Authority through 2021. And in exchange for that, they'll reimburse us $1,166,318. That will cover about half of the work that we do in this basin. That percentage varies from year to year depending on what else is going on, but covers generally about half my departmental budget. It does not require any match. They simply send it to us, and then we send our data back to them. And then the effective date of the amendment will be September 1st, 2019. So we'll essentially asking for Mr. Collinsworth's permission to sign such an agreement and extend our current contract. If there's any questions, I have a resolution.
Please read the resolution.
Okay. Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager, CEO, to amend the existing contract with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, whereby the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality will provide a 2-year extension of time and additional funding in an amount not to exceed $1,166,318 to the Brazos River Authority to perform water quality monitoring services and other activities under the Texas Clean Rivers Program.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? Motion made by Director Bennis, second by Director Huber. Please pull the board.
Presiding Officer Flores.
Yes.
Director Bell.
Yes.
Director Zaganino.
Yes.
Director Ball.
Yes.
Director Bennis.
Yes.
Director Henderson.
Yes.
Director Huber.
Yes.
Director Crone.
Yes.
Director LaChance.
Yes.
Director Lattimore.
Yes.
Director Leslie.
Yes.
Director Lloyd.
Yes.
Director Luton.
Yes.
Director Sanderson.
Yes.
Director Scott.
Yes.
Director Taylor.
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
At this time, we will take a 30-minute recess for lunch. Okay. we are ready to reconvene with agenda at 12:44. Agenda item 11, discussion and possible action on revisions to the Operations Policy Manual by Riley Wood, Senior Staff Attorney.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. This is going to be exciting. Really long too. Hopefully,
We can cut to the point where we just ask for questions. Anybody have any questions?
hopefully y'all had an opportunity to take a look at it. So what we're going to be doing today is going through our operation policy manual. Back in the day, prior to when Mr. Ford was here as general manager, everything was done through resolutions, and there wasn't sort of a compendium of policies that the authority did. So we hired an outside law firm back in 2001 or 2002, and they came in and kind of grabbed laws from all over the various codes that apply to river authorities. That's one of the odd things about river authorities is cities have a code specifically for cities, counties do, state agencies do, but river authorities don't. And we have various statutes and rules all over other codes that apply to us. And so what they did was pull together sort of a compendium of various laws and all the different, whether it's a government code, local government code, water code, and so forth that are applicable to us. And do our day-to-day operations would be a place that we could go to and look at. It's not going to have every single law out there that's applicable to us, but a general corpus of those that are of most interest. Because you don't have to necessarily have a policy to follow a law, but it's a good idea to have these together to help us operate on a day-to-day basis. So that was done back in 2002, and since that time, each legislative session, which happens every other year in odd years, they pass new laws, and what we'll end up doing is update the manual based on what happened in the legislative session, and that's gone on for since 2002. And what we decided was it would be a really good idea, since it's been a long time since anybody's really looked at the laws or the policies as a whole, to go back through them and make sure update statutes, maybe consolidate things that didn't necessarily have to be as drawn out as they were, and get rid of statutes that or policies that don't need to be there, put ones in place where that weren't there before. So that's what we've attempted to do here, and unfortunately, this policy book is about 180 some pages, and we're going to go page by page here. So feel free, if there's an issue, or if whenever you all went through it, feel free to stop me. What I'm going to do is I'm not going to go individually by every single edit or change in the policy. I'm going to talk broadly at the beginning of each section. Here's the changes we made. If there's something in that section that you're interested in, you want to discuss more, please stop me and we'll do that. And if I don't have an answer, hopefully somebody out here will. And so these are the categories.
Riley, do you have a mic?
Oh, you know what? I wouldn't think. I apologize. Yeah, let me drop this.
You want me to get it? Oh, got it?
Yeah, sorry. I hope hopefully that mic was catching me. So we had 5 main categories that we're looking at here. Number 1 was revisions to policies in order to better reflect our operations and management today. And some of those policies, such as the water cell policy, those are pure policy driven by the board as opposed to just reciting a statute or a law. It's where you all decide what the policy of the BRA is going to be. And there's just a handful of those. Number 2, getting rid of obsolete statutes, references to obsolete regulation statutes or policy manuals that were cited back in 2001 that they're obsolete now. 3, removing policies that are based on statutes that are found not to be applicable or obsolete. And then at number 4, adding statutes or regulations that we think are applicable and we think would be a good idea to incorporate into the policy manual. And then 5 was other, not really non-substantive, just rearranging things or consolidating, correcting minor areas that issues that we found. So I think, let's see.
I need to bring it up.
Oh, you're going to bring it up, okay. Any questions before we get started? Okay. Let's see. I'm going to see if they can remind me how to. There we go. Okay, so we're just going to go through this.
Hurry.
And I'm pretty much just going to try to catch it where we actually have changes. Oh, hey, Nancy, can you go over on the far left-hand side, that little red bar, and click that little red bar so it'll actually show the red lines. There we go. Okay, so first change, really brief, in this section, we just deleted the reference to the Texas Natural Resource Conservation. It's changed to TSEC, and that reference wasn't even anywhere in the document. So let's see here. Where did my? Oh wow. Okay.
Hit the big things.
Yeah, I've got to. There we go. Okay, 1.6. We just made clear that it's referencing organization-wide procedures and not intra-departmental procedures. Let's see, 1.7. We deleted, and we made this change throughout. We're deleting an obsolete reference, and that change has been made throughout the document. Let's see, 2.1, you'll also see throughout the document, it used to reference, I didn't talk about this earlier, but back in 2002, I think, they took all of the compendium of laws, dating all the way back to 1929 when the BRA was first formed, and all the amendments after that, and all that got repealed and it got put into a single code. It was in the water code at that point. It's since been moved over to the special districts code, and that's our enabling legislation. So we deleted all the references to the old legislation. Let's see here. Okay, so here we just added reference to a statute regarding the general manager, CEO, and that if there's a contract, it has to be approved by the Legislative Budget Board. 2.2. And this, in section 2.2, we deleted statutes and regulations that were determined not to be applicable to the BRA. We added an applicable statute from the Water Code that limited contracting with board members for a period of 1 year after they cease to be a board member. There's a section in here on the nepotism laws, and there were examples that followed, and we just consolidated those. And then we reordered some of the standards of conduct to group them in accordance with the statutes with where they were found. They were sort of scattered before, and we just regrouped it so that it reads a little bit smoother. Okay, let's see. 2.4. In section 2.4, we just added a statutory requirement that airfare not be reimbursed exceeding the lowest available fare. And then, let's see, 2.4. In 2.5, we deleted some references to some AG opinions that just weren't applicable. I'm not sure why they were even in there. This section here, we went ahead and deleted it, and the reason we deleted the immunity section is because what we didn't want to see is immunity is a concept that it doesn't need to be in our policies. We're going to have immunity regardless. And what we don't want to see happen is if a case or something like that came up and our policies were limiting us more than the law would limit us. And so we'd rather just rely on whatever the law is at any given time. And we went ahead and just removed this section from the policy. Board committees, 2.6, that's really a bylaw issue, and we didn't think it needed to be in our policies, so we removed it, and I mean, the bylaws provide for committees. Let's see. (2.8), on the recycling program, we just consolidated this statute. These are rules that change fairly regularly, and we went ahead and just consolidated it and said that we're going to comply with these statutes and these programs. (2.11), the same thing in this section. This got moved to another code. It was extensively changed. It's not a statute that we've even dealt with since I've been here that I'm aware of. It allows us to avoid liability in the event of acquiring a facility that has dealing with audits and so forth. And it's something that we'll do, but what we did was just instead of having the 5 or 6 pages of just pure statute quoted, we just consolidated instead that we can avail ourselves of it and we'll comply with it. Okay, 2.12. This was a new statute, actually, passed, I think maybe a couple years ago, that we added to the policies that basically says if an employee has a contract, then you can't pay him in excess of that contract without having a public hearing. 3.1, we deleted inapplicable statutes. We added in TSEC regulations that require consideration of historically underutilized businesses, which is something that we've done all along, and it's in TSEC rules that we need to do that. It wasn't in the policy previously, and so we felt like it was a good idea to incorporate it. Procurement of professional services. What we did here was really just update this statute to be applicable with current law and the various aspects of procuring professional services, just making sure that the language tracks what's in the law as far as indemnities go, and the law doesn't allow you to include certain language when it comes in a contract like this regarding indemnification, and we were just made sure that it was all quoted correctly.
I'm here.
Procurement of
Series 4.
yeah. Procurement of construction contracts. We did the same thing. The biggest change here is that several years ago, the policy on change orders used to be, yes, sir.
Coming back around to 3.2, if you don't mind, just
Yeah.
clarify something for me. At the top, it indicates the Brazos River Authority will procure professional services shall, well, it says that the procurement of professional services, the Brazos River Authority shall first select the most highly qualified provider of those services and fees on the basis of demonstrated competence and qualification, yada, yada. That's the engineering and that's for engineers, that's the language that's typically used for engineers, architects, and land surveyors.
Yes, sir.
And then you go through the whole routine of the negotiation stuff.
Yes, sir.
But that looks like an awful broad brush thing, because there's other classifications where you procure just based on demonstrated competence and a very reasonable price. So it sounds like you've taken the engineering thing and applied it across to other areas, the engineering thing doesn't apply. The architects and engineers can't be selected. No, I'm not talking about them, I'm talking about everybody else.
He's talking about the song.
You see what it sounds like you're taking the architect engineering standard and applying it across the board.
Consulting service, right?
Yeah, on consulting
So that
services?
would include the docs, you know, the accountants, the lawyers.
Yes.
As far as the
And-
lawyers can catch that. But if-
Yeah, and now lawyers, actually, you have to go through a similar process.
This thing's kind of written where it's just on the engineering standard, both for engineers, architects, and land surveyors. It just sounds that way.
Well,
Am I
and
taking it wrong, or?
no, I mean, and it is, I mean, this is under 2254 of the government code, which applies to a specific class of professional services. And now we, here at the BRA, actually do apply it broader than that, and we'll apply it to consulting services also. And if we go out for proposals for things, we will, this is the process that we follow for typically scientific related, maybe lab services, or if we're going to hire somebody that's a scientific related field, but specifically the statute itself is applicable to the architectural engineering. There's a whole list in there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just saying that, you know, if you look at the other area, and being an accountant, I'm kind of semi-do with this. If you're looking for an accountant, you will pick them based on demonstrated competence.
Correct.
And if you're at a reasonable price, it doesn't mean you go out here and get some guy negotiated down a little bit, you go to the next one.
Right.
Yes, you find the most highly qualified, and then you attempt to negotiate a fair and reasonable price with them. And if you can't come to an agreement, then you move on to the next. Well, and accounting as well, I think. I think it's.
You say a fair and reasonable price, but, you know, you look at it and say, you're doing an actual negotiation with an engineer. Okay? But typically, these other professions come in with RFP as opposed to RFQ.
Well, and we do everything through an RFP here, but it sort of functions like an RFQ, yeah.
Yeah. I was saying, I realize that you sat in other places here, you covered yourself, and that if you go to TAC 29213, you said you will use the Professional Services Procurement Act. Which means as appropriate for every class of person that you use.
Yeah.
Do any kind of business with professionally. So you're locked into that. All I'm saying is that be careful about your language, because here it implies that you're trying to use the engineering standards across the board. To me.
Yeah, well, I don't know,
Here's the list.
yeah, because this isn't really an engineering standard, it's just a professional services standard. And this professional services standard applies to accounting, architecture, landscape architecture, land surveying, medicine, optometry, professional engineering, real estate appraising, or professional nursing, or provided in connection with somebody licensed to do those things. Yeah.
I would respond that also, in addition, we have two things at the BRA. We've got the policy manual, and we also have procedures. In our procedures, purchasing procedures, we treat consulting services very similar. We follow the same format we do for the procurement of professional services, so we go through a similar process for consulting. So I think that may address hopefully some of the question. Because you're correct. I mean, I think.
254 double-oh-fours that give you the new standard green here to everybody else.
Yes.
But you go to the other folks, there's not that same.
Right.
And this means the engineers had a better lobbyist, okay, somewhere.
Yeah, it does.
You know,
Agreed.
It does.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
We've just always been really sort of conservative about going through a formal process so that if we're ever questioned, why did you select this consultant? We can say, you know what, it was a public process, we put it out, we asked folks, tell us about your demonstrated competence, give us your expertise. We looked at all those folks, we selected someone that we felt like was the most competent and then attempted to negotiate with that person. So historically, I'm not saying it's how we have to go forward, certainly we'll follow the direction of the board, but that's how we manage in the past, sort of restrictive on ourselves, just to ensure that we follow a public process.
Yeah, the only thing I also would suggest is that, you know, if you out there and hire somebody and follow the engineering deal, and all of a sudden they're not specifically held to that standard, and you get someone who wasn't too happy that he didn't get selected, or he got put into a process that really wasn't designed for him, that could cause you problems. So just, I'm saying, be careful.
Yes.
Okay? All right.
Thank you, sir. Okay, okay, let's see. Okay, on construction contracts, one of the big primary policies, other than removing some regulations and policies that weren't applicable and adding in some that were, one of the big changes that we're making going forward is that the way the policy used to read in the water code on construction contracts was that you could only have a change order, you could not have a change order in excess of 10% without board approval, and there were certain situations where you could do that. That got raised several years ago to 25%. But we as a policy decided not to go to the 25%, but kept it at the 10%. Just to be conservative. What we've decided, has been so many years since that policy got bumped up to 25%, and they've done that pretty much across the board in other statutes as well. So what we decided to do was kind of split the baby with keeping the 10% while having the opportunity to go to 25. And what we've done is we're going to keep 10% in the policy, but if we see a need to go to the 25%, we will not do it without board approval. So, and hopefully that'll help continue to rein in construction costs. And this is prevailing wage rates. You may remember a few board meetings ago, may have been this board meeting last year, we adopted our prevailing wage rate, but it wasn't actually in the policy, and so we went ahead and added that language. In 3.4, let's see. Oh, there's a statute that was that has to do with contingent legal fee contracts that have to be approved by the comptroller. Now, we've never actually had a contingent legal fee contract, but we felt like we should go ahead and add that language in. Under...
On the Davis-Bacon, how do y'all monitor that? Y'all have any issues with that at all?
No, we haven't, and what we have found is that really the Davis-Bacon rates are a lot lower than what most contractors are paying anyways, and so it's not been an issue. Let's see. Under high technology, we just updated this statute to be in compliance with, just updated it to follow the current statutes a little bit better than what was in there before. It requires us, if we're doing high technology purchases, to follow the municipal code. Yes.
Noticed that y'all had a section on reverse auctions. Have y'all ever used that procurement
No,
method?
we haven't.
Good.
We haven't. It's only it's only in there because it is an authorized purchasing method. But no, we've never even entertained it. Okay, and then additional methodologies of purchase. This is something also that's always been available to us and that we use regularly, but it wasn't ever in the policy, and we decided it wouldn't be a bad idea just to incorporate it in here. And that is being able to use state purchasing programs, cooperative purchasing programs, interlocal agreements. You'll notice that we always come to you all when we have an interlocal agreement to get board approval for that. And so we just added that language in here.
Would that include buy board?
Yes, sir. Let's see. Oh, okay, so getting down to section 4.1, hold on. Yeah, business and financial practices. We, every year we come to you all with our CIP and AOP. Previously, well, it's not letting me do this, but you can, previously they were all in one paragraph right there, and really it's the annual operating plan that is required by statute, and the capital improvement plan is not a statutorily based creature. And so what we did was just, we still think it's best practice and a good idea to keep it, but we just separated it out into its own paragraph. And let's see. In 4.2, we just updated the language to our current plans.
Hey, Riley?
Yes.
A very, very small minor thing.
Yes.
It looks like there's a space missing after authority and.
Let's see, where at?
Second line, first line red, far right, authority.
Oh, yeah, yep, we'll catch that. Yeah, and once we go back in, after we finish with the red line, after we're finished with this, what we're gonna do is we'll go back through and we'll correct any little minor edits and so forth like that before we put the final policy in its final form. But yeah, we'll take note of that. Thank you. Let's see, 4.3. In this section, what we did was we updated the language to follow current accounting rules and laws. We consulted with our outside accountants on this language, and this is what was proposed that would get us to what we're doing. Sorry, say one more time.
We'll go up about a page. Or down.
Go up a page?
Yeah, up a little bit.
Yeah.
That's where you kind of covered yourself a little bit on your professional services procurement.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Selection of the financial auditor, which would do with the accounting. And we do have to follow the 2254. Yeah. Yes, sir. Okay, this section per our bond counsel, although and Jim may be able to correct me, I think we may have a few outstanding industrial development bonds or pollution control bonds, but my understanding is that based on current laws, we can't do these anymore. So we went ahead and just deleted most of this section per our bond counsel. Capital improvement plan, let's see, 4.5. We just edited this to make sure that we're able to properly identify what items need to be in the operating capital. Let's see. Okay, 5.1, we updated this to include a little bit broader array of other reporting requirements that have come into existence. And we did add a catch-all down at the bottom as well. I think that's... Okay, that gets us to 6.1. We're getting pretty close here. In 6.1, we just updated language to be consistent with our current obligations and practices, and to be consistent with current law. A lot of the language in this section 6.1 is coming straight out of our enabling legislation. And so, and what's kind of interesting is at the time in 2002, when we adopted this, our enabling legislation hadn't been codified yet. And so we were updating this to be consistent with the codified version of our language, as opposed to what used to be in a lot of the older statutes. Okay. This section, similar to some of the others, we just updated the language to be consistent with law and consistent with our current practices. Real property, what we did is we changed this just to property rights and consolidated the language, because this is the way it really is set forth in statute on property. They don't really distinguish. And we went in and incorporated a few other codes that have to deal with property. And then we updated all the eminent domain language as well, as to what's required if we were to use eminent domain for, say one of our pipelines. .4. Once again, we updated this policy to be more in line with our current policies and our managerial practices. Okay, water cell policy. This is a policy that is not just, whereas most policies tend to have statutory requisites behind them. This is purely a board policy on how we're going to handle our cells of water. So what I'm going to do is I've kind of made a bullet point list here of the major changes that we're making based on the fact that we just got SysOps and through the last 15 years of selling water, just changes that we felt needed to be made to our policy. So first, we're going to ensure that all sales of raw water will be on standard forms and at rates set by the board. Now, we've always done that before, but we're making sure that language is in here. The water sold under new contracts will be limited to the uncommitted firm supply of water available. Third-party resales of water will be limited to a maximum of 10 years. So if somebody wants to resell water that they bought from us, it'll be limited to a 10-year window to resell it. And then they'll have to come back to us and they could re-up for another 10 years potentially, but it gives us a little bit of control there. Sets out selling preferences and factors that BRA will use in determining contractual decisions. Requires BRA and its customers to have water conservation and drought contingency plans. Allows customers to return water to BRA and sets out conditions for assignment or resale of water, and limits all new contracts to 30 years and provides for contracts to all end in the same year to allow for better planning of future water sales. So those are the major categories of what we did with this water cell policy for going forward. And I guess I'd ask if anybody has any questions on the water policy you'd like us to address. Yes?
When you say all the contracts will end at the same time, explain that.
I'm going to let Aaron maybe explain that. Is Aaron here? It affects him more than it does anybody. Sorry to call you Aaron.
So we have a number of contracts that certain contracts expire at certain times, and when we're looking at new contracts, we would like to have them all re-up or expire at the same time, so we can have the ability to have flexibility. I don't know.
So how do you do that with existing contracts you already have that you're shaking no?
Yeah, so for our existing contracts, we can't manipulate those expiration dates. So this would only apply for new contracts.
New contracts, thank you.
Or renewing contracts, yeah. We have.
And when we do that, we envision executing contracts in 5-year increments. So that way we can come up on those.
Right.
Okay. Good luck.
Thank you.
And the significance of that is going to be, again, we're looking down the road, and the significance of that is going to be in 20 or 30 years when we're trying to renew contracts, being able to, at certain periods in history, in the future, look out and assess how much of our water supply is still available. Reservoirs are going to get older, water supplies are going to reduce, and if we can have more structure in when we renew contracts, it will allow us to better assess what our product looks like.
Yeah. Anything else? Okay, I'll move on. In 6.6, we updated this language also to be consistent with how we manage and operate. And set pricing. Let's see. The water conservation and drought contingency plan policy, we just had that item a little bit earlier this morning. And what we've done is consolidate this section to require us to comply with the statutes and regulations out there requiring the adoption of the drought contingency and water conservation plans. What this section originally had in it, you'll see a lot of deletion. Most of that deletion is because it was listing straight out of the regulations, which actually have changed a little bit over time, but it was listing the regulations that would apply to our customers. If it was a municipal customer, if it was a industrial customer, and so forth. And we determined that we really don't need to have that in our policies, what our customers' plans need to look like. That's up to them. They've got to do that. But we are going to require customers to provide us their plans, as we discussed a second ago in the water policy. And okay, let's see here. In 6.8, once again, we just updated the language to be consistent with current law. And let's see, 6.9, well, I just passed 6.9. Well, no, 6.9 was, no, there wasn't really much of a change there. Just updated the reference. regional planning, we consolidated this language here a little bit just to say that we can take whatever action under the Regional Waste Disposal Act. That's not something we really are involved in and do, but it's an option. And then the last policy is our oil and gas policy. And what we did here was, the policy used to say was that the board would appoint the asset management committee to look at oil and gas leases if something like that came about, if somebody wanted to lease some of our land for oil and gas. And what we did was we just changed it in case it's not the asset. We didn't want to bind you all to have to do an asset management committee, appoint whatever committee you want, if you want to appoint a committee, or the board could handle it themselves. And then the rest of the policy was actually adopted based on General Land Office rules a number of years ago. So we went ahead and left the rest of that alone, and that is the end of the policies.
So this was important enough to us that it was, well, let me start over. It was important enough to us that we didn't want to say this is in your binder, look at it, and if you have any questions, ask. So that's a lot to go over. Does anybody have any questions or comments or thoughts, or? It's a lot of stuff.
Still want to come back around to page number 78.
Okay.
Very, very briefly, okay?
Yeah, let's see if we can. Well, 70, what is?
Here you go.
Okay, yeah, that's
At the very top it says, otherwise, except as otherwise provided, yada, yada.
Yeah, gosh, I can't even read that.
Yeah, you look a little bit higher, I think.
Too light. I wonder what section?
78 of 127 on the markup anyway. On the one that I have.
Nancy, could you, hold on, let me see here. In between the pages, could you double click on the little line?
245 on the total.
Well, I was going to bring it up on the board here. If you could double click the little line in between the pages. Yeah, I like that. Double click that. Right there, yes, right there. And that'll show me the pages. Okay, there we go.
431 pages.
No, I'm talking about just for this one section.
Oh, okay.
Just one second. Yeah. The whole book. Oh my God.
Okay, let's see.
The whole book. That's a big section.
Yeah.
Sorry, this little
That's
thing.
okay. You have to go up a little bit. I apologize. I hate to.
No, we're good.
I hate to be a thing counter. But I'm going to.
Okay, gotta be getting close.
Ooh, that's 79.
Okay.
There you go.
So there you go.
Oh, that's mine.
Is that
Move your
it?
mic closer or turn it
That's
on.
78. I wonder if
Your mic.
this version looks a little bit different. What section is it in?
4.3. How's that
Okay.
sound?
Huh. I don't know.
Oh, sorry. My mic, you can't hear me on my mic, can you? 4.3, and then the second page of 4.3. How's that sound?
Yeah.
Apologize.
4.3.
No, we're getting there.
Oh, there we go. All right, rock and roll. Okay. 49,192. I'm going to make a suggestion to you. And right there after 49,192, okay?
Where it says 49,192 and then.
Yeah, then it goes red
resolution.
after that.
Yes.
I'm going to suggest that you make a reference to TWC 49.199 A6C. And the reason that you do that is that it specifies there even though you said you're going to use the gaffer in other places, it specifies the audit manuals and the audit processes under gas that are used. There's different types of auditing manuals that can be utilized under gas, but they use a specific audit manual layout under states and local governments. And so that's the one you're going to want to use, and you're working on your books. You want to make sure that the auditor or anybody else is put on notice that you have to use that format,
Yeah.
that layout.
So
And
you
that's
said 49.1.
49,199
199, okay.
A6C. And that's going to lay it out for you.
199 E6C.
A6C.
A6C, got you.
Alpha 6 Charlie. And that's going to lay it out for them and say, hey, you're going to have to use the particular manuals and the audit procedures, and you're also going to have to utilize gaffer, even though I understand you're producing a CAFR, and it will be done under gaffer. But If you're not going for an award, you'll never know that. And it doesn't say you're going for the award in your policy. So someone could get around it.
Got you.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right.
And I'm guessing you understand all that, don't you?
Tracy, Director Bocant.
Can you go to section 6.5, please?
Yes.
The water policy? It's basically just a general question. There's a lot of language that you've added to this policy. Is this just putting words to what we're currently doing, or are we making a lot of changes
We're
here?
making some changes.
We do this every meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are definitely making changes. I mean, for instance, right now, we don't have a policy for resale of up to 10 years. And that's something just based on experience and constant requests from customers and so forth that in evaluating what we have, we think is reasonable. And now as far as our contracts, that we've always, with that's already what we do as far as getting board approval and doing things in contracts.
So the sales of water have changed over time. Back in the mid-2000s, we still had water to sell. So we were very restrictive on how we would allow resale. Then we sold all of our water, and then the drought of 2011 happened, and then all the growth. And we've got folks that are sitting on long-term water contracts that if they can make that resale possible. So that's the reason some of these changes in here are, and we've come to the board in the past with when we started doing some of the resales, but that's what we're trying to clarify here.
Yeah,
for some of it.
Yeah, and I think we additionally wanted to make clear that folks, sort of based on that too, back in the day where we had a lot of trouble selling water, we didn't want people just giving it back to us, and so we're making it clear now where we have an abundance of people needing water and there isn't any that they can give it back to us, and we'll find another customer for it. As far as conservation and drought contingency plans, that's it hasn't been in the policy, but I think we've always required folks to provide them, haven't we? Yeah. Let's see. Oh, this got moved. Let's see here. We set out sort of the standards for when we're going to allow an assignment, or when we're going to, let's see, allow assignments. I mean, Brad or Aaron, is there another aspect of this you think we ought to be?
No, you might just highlight the part that we added under the selling preferences. It will also be considering health and safety and a couple other things there. We added, I think, some language about the state water plan.
Let's see.
It was up right under the selling preferences section.
Where is that? Oh, is this it right here? The Brazos River Authority may also consider the ability of our system to reliably and efficiently supply the request, the water needs of the customer to be reflected in the state water plan and other factors, including but not limited to immediacy of the customer's need for water, the magnitude of the customer's request, the customer's conservation efforts, health and safety, and environmental issues such as contamination of existing sources and customers' compliance with rules, regulations, or contractual provisions, just to kind of give us some flexibility. Oh, I don't want to exit.
So I want to, Riley.
One last comment.
Go ahead.
Please, I apologize. And it's just a comment.
Go ahead.
Won't take long. The thing y'all had in there, in y'all's policy regarding independence for the auditor,
Okay,
and the appearance of independence,
yes.
and your extension of that to work done by the outside auditor on projects other than the actual independent audit, whether that be an agreed upon procedures engagement or a consulting engagement, whatever the case may be. Y'all have pointed out that there needs to be an affirmative finding that getting involved in any kind of engagement outside of the independent audit cannot have the appearance or in fact cause an independence issue for that auditor. Okay? And those kind of engagements can create that problem, an independence issue. And so my comment is that that is one of the few times I have ever seen that kind of tone from the top and that kind of foresight and insight ever.
Oh,
Ever. It's big, it's huge.
yeah.
Because it's an area that's so ripe for an improper perception. So that someone has got some real snap to put that in there.
Was it a red language?
I don't remember.
I think,
but it's-
yeah, just give it.
Just take credit for it, but that's huge, I'm telling you.
Thank you.
Huge.
Well,
That tells you a lot about the tone at the top.
We'll think Matt Wheelish.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Anything at all?
So Riley, thank you, Laura Lee, the team. They have been working on this for at least 6 months.
Yep.
I appreciate your time reviewing and the comments and input. At this time, seeing no other questions, Riley, can you read the resolution, please?
Okay, be it resolved by the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority that the revisions to the Operations Policies Manual of the Brazos River Authority be accepted as presented at its April 29, 2019 meeting, to be effective April 30, 2019.
You heard the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? Who said that?
Weren't there proposed changes suggested here? Are we?
I think it's subject to inclusion of comments, or just as it was presented?
Yes.
Yes,
As presented?
Yes.
Okay.
that's
Ronnie,
my
can you say
understanding.
that? Okay. So everyone has heard the resolution with the proposed comments and changes to the resolution. Is that correct, Laura Lee?
Yes.
Do I hear a motion to adopt?
So moved.
A motion was made by Director Sanderson and second by Director Rick Huber. Please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores?
Yes.
Director Bell?
Yes.
Director Zaganino?
Yes.
Director Ball?
Yes.
Director Bennis?
Yes.
Director Henderson?
Yes.
Director Huber?
Yes.
Director Crum?
Yes.
Director Chance?
Yes.
Director Lattimore?
Yes.
Director Leslie?
Yes.
Director Lloyd?
Yes.
Director Luton?
Yes.
Director Sanderson?
Yes.
Director Scott?
Yes.
Director Taylor?
Yes.
Director Wilson?
Yes.
Item number 12, discussion and possible action on operation permit, water allocation by Jim Forte, Planning and Development Manager.
Good afternoon. I'm going to give you a history lesson and then walk you through the process that we have undertaken to ensure that when we asked you to contract for water that we acquired under our system operation permit, that the amount of water that we're contracting for is firm, is something that we can contract for long-term, and that has the same reliability as the water that we've contracted for previously. 1960s as reservoirs on the Little River tributary were being permitted. There was a report in support of those reservoirs, and one of the findings was that there was evidence that there was more water available for contracting than represented solely by the water that was available in those reservoirs. And it suggested that by the systemic use of that water, that there could be more water made available to our customers. With the passage of Senate Bill 1 in 1997, the state legislature funded the development of water availability models. We call them WAMs. And those are very complex, sophisticated, computer-based tools that take into account historic hydrology of each basin, the water rights that have been granted previously, and can calculate the additional availability of water to be permitted in the future. In, 2002, the Brazos River Authority decided to pursue or explore the availability of water in the basin. And in April, at this board meeting in 2003, the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority authorized the General Manager, CEO, to enter into and negotiate 3 contracts, one with a consulting engineering firm to provide the hydrology, another for legal assistance in pursuing the permit, and another one to help us with telling the story. We filed that application in June of 2004. We call it our system operation permit, and we thought things were going along pretty well, because in October of 2004 we received word back from the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality that our permit application was what was known as administratively complete. That meant that they had in their hands everything that they thought that we needed, or they needed, for us to continue to pursue that permit. As you can see here, the permit was approved by the TSEC commissioners in November of 2016, so 12 years after that water right was declared administratively complete, we had a permit in hand. I will suggest to you that the multiple meetings that we had, both in front of the TSEC Commission, the 2 full hearings that we had in front of the State Office of Administrative Hearings, the roughly 50 counterparties that we had throughout the entire process. We negotiated away most of those. A handful of them went through this hearing process, went with us. One of them actually filed for an appeal in District Court, Travis County. But on or about September of 2018, our permit was incontestable and we had it in hand. The unique thing about the system operation permit is it's not a reservoir. That makes it unique in this entire state. It's been described as both by both the TSEC staff as well as those who were our adversaries in the permit, that it's the most complex water right ever approved in the state of Texas. Again, it gives us access to 330,000 acre-feet of what's known as non-firm water. That is backed up by what's in our reservoirs. We have a water management plan that is part of the permit. That water management plan, by the condition in the permit, must be updated every 10 years, which subjects our permit to another contested case process every 10 years. That is unique from our reservoirs in that those reservoir permits are permanent. And within that water management plan and within the permit, we have certain diversion limits, and I'm going to talk about the significance of that in a second. Prior to the system operation.
Jim, can you give the board an idea of how much money we spent in that 15-year period of trying to get the permit?
Well, I used to joke with Phil Ford, who supported this process immensely, that when we first started, the budget for the project was something around $5 or $6 million, and we thought we'd have the permit by 2007. Cheap at twice the price kind of went by the board, but we paid about $25 million all told through this permitting process. But again, when you compare that $25 million and the conclusion that we've reached here of this permit providing roughly 100,000 acre feet, you compare that to Allen's Creek, which is our next water supply project, cost will be 20-fold for the same amount of water. So thank you, sir. Yes, it took us a great deal of money and time to get, but we think it's well worth it. Our prior water rights are all resident in these circles. We talked about the core reservoirs earlier, the ones in yellow, and then the three that we own, and then Allen's Creek. Water from the system operation permit is in these blue lines downstream of these reservoirs, and is also represented by the return flows and discharges from various wastewater treatment plants throughout the basin. In October of 2017, we came to you, at that time, finally having what we felt was a pretty firm permit, and we asked you to extend the contract with the hydrologist firm that we had retained to develop a contract analysis tool that we call the CAT. And there are all kinds of CAT jokes that we use when we refer to it, but what that CAT model does, it takes the water availability models and it complements them in looking at what is available in these individual stream segments throughout the basin. Each one of those stream segments has a limitation with respect to how much we can divert, at what rate we can divert, and what the impact of such things as Senate Bill 3 environmental flows have on our ability to divert. What the CAT does then is we were able to put in scenarios of demands in each one of these segments to determine exactly how much water would be available for contracting once we did that. I listed a number of the modeling assumptions that we've got here, and I'd like to highlight a couple of them. Part of the requirement from the permit was that we extend the hydrology for the water availability model for the Brazos Basin from 1997 to 2015, so that we got another drought of record within that hydrology. Prior to that, the hydrology for the WAM went from 1940 to 1997, which picked up the 1950s drought, which was the drought of record for the basin. We extended it through the 2015 drought, and what we found was that we had a new drought of record for our upstream reservoirs, but the 2011-2015 drought, because of the diversity of our basin in terms of the tributaries that we have and the climate from the eastern side of the basin to the western side of the basin, that it did not affect other reservoirs or the available yield to us through the permit in total. We looked at 2050 reservoir sedimentation conditions. We test the sedimentation of our reservoirs on a 10-year cycle. And based on those 10-year reports, you can then forecast how much storage loss we're suffering through sedimentation as we go into the future. So for conservatism, for the contracting analysis that we did here, we forecasted out to what those reservoirs are going to look like in 2050. I mentioned the Senate Bill 3 environmental flow rules. Part of the extended processing of the permit included about 4 years of negotiating with the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department on initially a special condition for environmental flows that was then superseded by the fact that immediately after those negotiations had been completed, the legislature passed Senate Bill 3, which included a very specific process for creating environmental flow rules for all basins within the state, and obviously the Brazos Basin as well. During the negotiations with Parks and Wildlife, we entered into a memorandum of understanding with them, and one of the components in that memorandum of understanding was that when the permit was final, that we would make a donation of water out of that permit to the Texas Water Trust. Texas Water Trust is administered by Texas Water Development Board, and water right holders can donate water to that trust. However, an initial permit cannot include water for that purpose. So one of the things that we'll do at our first 10-year anniversary, the revision to the water management plan, is we will make an amendment to our permit to allow that donation. So that will be one of the elements that we have to undertake. We very conservative in the use of return flows. Is over 260,000 acre feet of permitted return flows in our basin. Our assumptions used about a third of that. Many of y'all are aware of the Possum Kingdom Granbury Balancing Protocol, in which we look at the relative levels of water in those two reservoirs. That's incorporated into our modeling assumption, of course, and as Aaron talked about earlier, the drought contingency plan is also an element that we look at. In May of 2018, just about a year ago, we started a process of looking at how we would determine who might receive water from the Brazos River Authority under this permit. We had been receiving letters, emails, phone calls, you name it, from customers all the way back to 2005. As soon as they saw that we had a priority date and that we were serious about getting this permit, we started getting interest. We took those requests, we looked at them with respect to their validity. As you can imagine, the requests that dated back to 2005, there were several customers that we called them, and in some cases, they didn't even know that they'd made that request because there'd been such a changeover and overturn in their staffing, or their business plans had changed. They just simply didn't need the water. A good example is Luminant, that had asked for 80,000 acre feet of water under the permit to provide cooling capacity for their proposed Comanche Peak 3 and 4 up near Lake Granbury. Of course, they've withdrawn their request to the Nuclear Regulatory Agency for those licenses, and so that 80,000 acre feet was put back in the mix. We looked at the state water plan. You can imagine that our state water planning process, which essentially takes water demands and matches that up with water supply. The water plan for both the Region H and Brazos G assigned the system operation water to certain customers. So if they weren't, those customers and those demands weren't in our request list, we reached out to them to make sure that that their needs were going to be incorporated. We looked at customers that may have made a request for a great deal of water, and we looked at what decade of need they might have. If this was a growth industry, for example, that say water plan, for example, is a 50-year plan, that their needs could be divided into different decades, and we knew that we had an alternate supply sometime in the future, say in the lower basin, where we, with the inclusion of Allen's Creek as a water supply source, you can meet a lot of that downstream lower basin need. Grand total, 50 individual customers asked for approximately 400,000 acre feet of water out of the 334,000 acre feet of non-firm. So you can see there's already an imbalance. When we looked at all of this data, the needs that were no longer represented by specific requirements, we pared that 400,000 acre foot number down to about 220,000 acre feet. We then went through another process of looking at more filters in terms of when that water was needed, where it might be needed. For example, the system operation permit didn't create any water in our tributaries or in our tributary reservoirs. So we looked at customers who were predominantly on the main stem of the river and what needs that could be met. We pared that down then from 220,000 acre feet to about 136,000 acre feet. Then we took that 136,000 acre feet of requests and we put it into the CAT. And we ran specific scenarios based on all the modeling assumptions I talked about earlier. And that number ends up being about 106,000 acre feet, distributed by these types: agriculture and irrigation, mining, industrial, municipal. Gulf Coast Water Authority is one of our larger customers, and they have customers within their system that are both municipal, industrial, and agriculture. We kept out a little bit for ourselves to make sure that if we have a customer that has a dire need, that has some issue that they need the immediate access to firm water, that we would be able to accommodate them. And then we carved out some for the Water Trust. If you look at them from a diversity of where in the basin, about 13,000 acre feet in the upper part of the basin, not a lot in the middle of the part of the basin, but the majority of it being down in the lower part of the basin. And here is that same scenario mapped, and you can see the diversity in the locations of other water requests. Our conclusion, mentioned earlier, 106,031 acre feet are available. That's about all we can squeeze out of it. Being conservative and making sure that when we enter into those contracts, that we can deliver against those contracts and that we don't have anyone come up short other than any requirements that they might have under a drought contingency plan. Our contracts are face value, take or pay, long-term, and we think 106,000 acre feet of water is available under the permit. At our current system rates, about $7.2 million a year in income. So that $25 million expense gets amortized in about 3 years, a little over 3 years, so pretty decent investment. I've got a resolution, but I can answer any questions that you have, or lean on some of the hydrologists if I can't answer it.
Jim, thank you for not only explaining the process to us, this has been a very long time coming, so thank you for all of
Your hard work, and thank you for keeping us up to date every quarter as this has progressed.
Well, I came here in 2001, and this was the first project that I got assigned to me, so I'm ready to start another one.
Well, very good.
He's the one project guy. Although Chuck Wolf in his project management class doesn't want me to talk to his project managers, since I came in 4 times over budget and 3 times as long. But anyway, it's been my pleasure. The support of the board. There were a period of time where we seemed like we were coming back to the board every quarter for additional funding, but that support and encouragement got us to where we are right now.
Very good. Seeing that there are no other comments, please read the resolution.
The following resolution is presented for consideration to the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority for adoption at its April 29, 2019 meeting. Whereas in June 2004, the Brazos River Authority submitted a water right permit application to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality for a system operation permit, and whereas an extensive permitting process, including hearings before the State Office of Administrative Hearings and multiple appearances before the commissioners of the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, in September 2016, a final order was issued approving the system operation permit, and whereas following denial of an appeal to the district court in Travis County, the system operation permit became incontestable in September 2018, and whereas hydrological analysis of water rights held by the Brazos River Authority, including the system operation permit, indicate that an additional 106,031 acre-feet of long-term firm water is available to be contracted for by the Brazos River Authority. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager / CEO to enter into additional contracts for the sale of water in an amount not to exceed 106,031 acre-feet per year.
Motion to adopt was made by Richard Ball and second by Rick Huber.
Great. We're finally there.
Congratulations. Please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores,
Yes.
Director Bell,
Yes.
Director Zaccanino,
Yes.
Director Ball,
Yes.
Director Bennis,
Yes.
Director Henderson,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes, indeed.
Director Crum,
Yes.
Director LaChance,
Yes.
Director Lattimore,
Yes.
Director Leslie,
Yes.
Director Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Luton,
Yes.
Director Sanderson,
Yes.
Director Scott,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Wilson,
Yes.
Item number 13, discussion and possible action on surplus personal property by David Thompson, Chief Financial Officer.
Before I get started, we have some new board members, so I need to explain why we have this kind of an agenda item in the board. Some laughs here, but basically, state statute requires that anytime we try to dispose of property, surplus property, we're required to come to the board to get approval for those properties that we're disposing of. And sometimes the list can be quite long or short, so but our process is that we go out to, we get requests from the basin in different departments on what assets or properties they want to dispose of. We go through the process of evaluating, getting descriptions, and finding out why they want to surplus the property. And then we get pictures of it. We go through the process and say, okay, yeah, we'll let you surplus this property. Now, sometimes we do find properties that other basin areas can use, and we'll just distribute that property to those other groups. If we decide that this is the surplus properties we want to get rid of, we bring it to the board. Board approves the surplus. Once you approve it, then we put it out on a well-advertised auction and sell it. So any questions on that?
No.
No,
It's
personal.
It's
Personal
personal property.
Yeah, we're not firing anybody.
We're not selling people, we're just,
I usually don't get that far. I usually click through it pretty quick, so.
okay, no other comments. Please read the resolution.
Or do you want me to show the properties first and then?
Yes.
Right there.
And I got it to one page too this time.
I'm right that this is property that is worn out, not repairable, or no longer used.
That's correct. It's or cost efficient to repair. Sometimes it's just property that we don't have any use for anymore. But most of this property is quite old and it needs replacement. Okay, any questions? I'll go back and read, okay. Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorize the General Manager, CEO, to dispose of the following surplus personal properties under the terms and conditions that are in the best interest of Brazos River Authority. Be it further resolved that the Board authorizes General Manager, CEO, in certain instances to continue to use and/or maintain previously authorized surplus property in a manner that is the best interest of the Brazos River Authority until the appropriate replacement property is received and placed in order. Okay, these are properties that are no longer needed, repairs are not cost efficient, or they're simply not working. Environmental services, we have a
Chromatograph.
chromatograph. Thank you. with accessories model ICS 3000. In central office, we had one lot of miscellaneous wood and metal file cabinets and approximately 16.
19.
Oh, so 16. So it went up, 19, I'm sorry. One lot of miscellaneous office supplies, binders, file folders, file trays. One lot of furniture sofas, quantity of 3. Possum Kingdom, we had one riding lawnmower, model Grasshopper M36. One lot of various window air conditioning units, quantity of 7. In Temple Belton, we had 2 TB floating aerator 02 model Aqua Lator, and one generator model generic 49491403030, and then we had 4 dump trailers.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? A motion made by Richard Ball, second by Dave Scott. Please call the board.
Presiding Officer Flores,
Yes.
Director Bell,
Yes.
Director Zaganino,
Yes.
Director Ball,
Yes.
Director Benish,
Yes.
Director Henderson,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Crone,
Yes.
Director LaChance,
Yes.
Director Lattimore,
Yes.
Director Leslie,
Yes.
Director Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Luton,
Yes.
Director Sanderson,
Yes.
Director Scott,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Wilson,
Yes.
Item number 14, discussion and possible action on Microsoft Enterprise Agreement by Courtney
Dobogai.
IT Manager.
Good afternoon. This item is for Microsoft Enterprise Agreement, which we've had for 9 years. And on June 30th, we're due for a renewal, which we renew every 3 years. Up until now, we have not had a need to come to the board because it's been less than $500,000 for the 3 years. However, this time, it is greater than that. So that's the reason why we're coming to you guys to get permission to enter into an agreement. This software is for to run our operating systems and all of our endpoints. It's also for assurance, rights to upgrade the software and such. And we can make license changes every 3 years with the renewal of our agreement. These are some of the things that we get with the enterprise agreement, some of the tools that we utilize. The on-premise solution quote came in at I think it's in your write-up, but it came in at $586,581. And the hosted solution, which is Microsoft 365, came in at $700,266. So we're asking for permission to evaluate both of these options and for our GM CEO to make the decision either way. And these are some of the benefits of 365 and the reason why we're contemplating going to that. And there's more tools and security features. Most state agencies and local state entities are using it now. If there's no other questions, I've got a resolution to read.
Anybody have any questions?
I'm sorry? Oh, yeah, that's part of the Office suite. Yeah. I just kind of, there's a lot of stuff that I didn't include on there yet.
Seeing no other questions or comments, go ahead and read your resolution.
Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorize the General Manager, CEO, to execute a contract with Microsoft for a software enterprise agreement having a term of 3 years and a not to exceed cost of $750,000.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? Question, sorry.
Is this the rate for municipality?
Yes, this is on a state contract.
Okay.
Is there a motion to adopt?
I'll move to adopt.
Yes. Director Crone. Motion was made by Judy Crone and second by Alan Sanderson. Please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores?
Yes.
Director Bell?
Yes.
Director Zangadino?
Yes.
Director Ball?
Yes.
Director Bennis?
Abstain.
Director Henderson?
Yes.
Director Huber?
Yes.
Director Crone?
Yes.
Director LaChance?
Yes.
Director Lattimore?
Yes.
Director Leslie?
Yes.
Director Lloyd?
Yes.
Director Luton?
Yes.
Director Sanderson?
Yes.
Director Scott?
Abstain.
Director Taylor?
Regrettably, yes.
Director Wilson?
Yes.
Item number 15, report and possible discussion on legislative update by Matt Phillips, Legislative and Governmental Affairs Manager.
Thank you. So I'm going to kind of go through what's going on with the session. I'll say that I stand before you all as a man who's big enough to admit when he's wrong. In January, I told a lot of you that the leadership was in lockstep on working on a few issues like property taxes and education reform, and that I really thought that they had turned a corner and we're going to get it done and everything was going to be fine and everybody was going to get along. And I don't know what in my many years of legislative experience made me naively believe that that was the case, because it's really not, and we're to a point in session where a lot of those big issues seem to be falling off the rails. And the reason that's problematic is, you know, while we're focused on some smaller issues that hit closer to home for us and our operations, those larger issues kind of set the tone for the entirety of the session. They can grind everything to a halt, and they very well could force the need for a special session, which is looking more and more likely every day, particularly for public ed reform and tax reform. So I think that there's a very good chance they could be back during the summer unless they can figure something out between now and then. They all agree that something needs to be done on all these issues. They just don't agree with how. So that's kind of the broad 30,000-foot view of the larger issues that are kind of moving through the session. Oddly enough, they're pretty close together on the budget, which is the only thing they really have to do. So I think they'll pass that. But then they might get called back for some of these other issues, maybe in June or July. So I'm going to spend some time talking about the issues that we're more focused on. I say this every time I do on these updates. This is by no means an exhaustive list of everything that we're looking at. It's kind of a snapshot of some of the issues. You know, we've got a tracking list of thousands of bills, but these are some of the ones that have kind of floated to the top and are really, for the most part, the ones I'll talk about are at least moving, have been voted out of committee. They're not completely dead at this point, so there's a chance that any one of these could pass. On the flood front, each house has passed its kind of package of flood-related bills. The House has passed House Bill 5, 13, and 26, and the Senate's passed Senate Bills 6, 7, and 8. They all do some pretty similar things. They just do them in different ways. House Bill 5 and Senate Bill 6 are very similar in that they're mainly related to emergency management training, and they set up committees to look at debris removal. So they don't require any specific entity to do debris removal. That was a concern of ours. We didn't want to be pinned with that job for a basin the size of Tennessee. We do not have the resources to do that in every tributary of the Brazos River. So they set up a committee to look at debris removal. What's the process for it? Who will be responsible for it? So we'll watch and see what comes out of that. House Bill 13 and Senate Bill 7 are both bills that set up a flood infrastructure fund. They set up a fund to fund flood mitigation projects now and in the future. For our purposes, they're not bad bills in that they don't mandate our involvement. They don't mandate our cooperation. We can choose to involve ourselves in those types of projects under both bills if we wanted to. And there may be instances where we do want to get involved in a flood project that has an associated water supply benefit similar to the core reservoirs that we have in our basin. So that may be something we look at, but it doesn't mandate it. So we're obviously much happier with the way that those turned out because that was a concern. House Bill 26 doesn't have a Senate companion. It requires us as dam operators to notify emergency operations centers in downstream counties of our dams when we're making releases. We already do this, but it then requires those emergency operations folks to notify the public of a whole host of different information, such as, if there's going to be potential flooding, where to watch out for potential flooding, if there's going to be roads and bridges out. It goes through a whole list of stuff that the emergency operations centers are going to be responsible for notifying people of. We will not be responsible for that. We notify the EOCs, they notify the people. So we're perfectly happy with that arrangement in terms of dam release notification. Senate Bill 8 is the state flood plan. That creates a state flood planning process similar to the regional water planning process. So it's a process we're very familiar with. It's one that we would be involved in this state flood plan. I'm sure we would be part of one of multiple regions that would look at individual regions, trying to look at what are flood projects that would work to mitigate flooding in that region, and then you send those to the Water Development Board, you develop a state flood plan, and you use that plan to fund projects and implement them throughout the basin. Oddly enough, while Senate Bill 8 has a very, very detailed setup for what a state flood plan would entail in terms of laying out who's on the regions and what the regions will look like and what they're supposed to look at, House Bill 13 actually has state flood plan language in it, but it basically just says the Water Development Board will establish a state flood plan in coordination with rules that the board adopts. It's literally one sentence, so that's all it says. So both houses have passed a version of a state flood plan. It's just one's much more detailed than the other. House Bill 13 and Senate Bill 8 also both include a requirement that the State Soil and Water Conservation Board do a study on their dams. These are what we call the dirt board dams. They're the small earthen dams, many of which don't have a dam maintenance plan. Nobody's looked at them in many, many years. And so they require the Soil and Water Conservation Board to inspect and create a dam maintenance plan for all of those dams. The thing that concerned us with that is some of the initial language could have been interpreted to allow them to do that type of process for all dams in the state. We're already highly regulated by TCEQ, federal government. We don't need the soil board looking at our dams, nor should they want to look at our dams because they, would kind of be out of their depth in looking at the type of things that we operate. House Bill 13 and Senate Bill 8 both have provisions to look at earthen dams and do dam maintenance plans for them. In terms of where all these things are, both sides have passed, again, their flood bill packages and have sent them over to the other side, and the other side's ignoring them. They're not looking at each other's flood bills for whatever reasons. I think that there's a lot of discussion about whose name's going to end up on the final bills and whether they're going to be Senate bills or House bills. I mean, to be quite honest with you, that's kind of the gamesmanship that's going on right now in terms of what bills will ultimately end up passing that are going to take care of this flooding issue or look at taking care of it in the future. If I were a betting man, which I've been wrong before, but I would think that Senate Bill 8's going to move, Senate Bill 6 or House Bill 5, since they're so similar, are going to move, and then House Bill 13, which sets up the Flood Infrastructure Fund, will move, but it will come closer to looking like Senate Bill 7. So I think that's what will end up happening, but time will tell. We'll see in the next couple of weeks. The last piece of information I'll give with these is none of these contain provisions that require us to change our operations or do pre-releasing or any of that kind of stuff. We've been very diligent about making sure that they don't, and so that's good. All right. Surface water, been a very unexciting session on surface water. There's very little going on. Update of water availability models, that's something that we support. House Bill 723 has passed the House. It's over in the Senate. They had a hearing on it the other day. It's going to require TCEQ to update the WAMs starting with the Brazos. So that's a process that we'll be engaged in whenever they get to that point. What always kills this is funding. Right now, I do believe there is funding in one version of the budget to do this. We'll see if it survives. And then expedited water right amendments, that sets up a process at TCEQ to move water right amendments faster and without notice when they're minor. So if you're moving a diversion point on a if you're moving a diversion point on a contiguous piece of property for the same water right and it doesn't get in between another existing diversion point, then it allows you to move that process faster. If you're changing the use of a water right but not the consumptive nature of the water right, so you wouldn't be authorizing the use of more water, it allows you to get a quicker water right amendment. This is something that made it really far through the process last session and died at the end on the calendar. So it's something that'll move. We may take advantage of that process at some point in the future. We'll see. But it's a good bill. It'll at least help them. It'll at least help them move these smaller amendments faster. Groundwater, been a very busy session on groundwater, as it usually is. I won't go through every single one of these because a lot of these, particularly 700 numbers, are bills that passed last session and belong to Representative Lyle Larson and were vetoed by the governor for a variety of reasons, unrelated to their policy implications, quite frankly. But none of them are particularly problematic. These two, 726 and 1066, both, and Senate Bill 800, both of those contain some pretty decent changes in groundwater regulations. 726 doesn't allow groundwater districts to adopt moratoriums on issuance of permits without a public process. Right now, they can just adopt moratoriums and no longer issue permits, so now they're going to have a public process for that. It requires something that's in 1066 and 800, and then it requires transport permits to be extended for as long as you have an operating permit. So it syncs up operation permits with transport permits. What good is an operations permit if your transport permit expires before your operations permit does? So it seeks to sync up those two things. I think those two or three have a relatively decent chance of passing because they got pretty far in the process last session. Loser pays, that basically implements loser pays on groundwater district lawsuits. So groundwater districts will have to pay attorney's fees if they lose. Right now they don't. They don't like this bill. One of them, when I say one's light and one's less light, this one limits damages to 100,000. This one limits them to like 300,000. So one of them just got a higher limit on damages. And then another one that has a relatively good chance of passing is groundwater district rules over a common aquifer. If you've got multiple districts over one aquifer, it requires them to adopt similar rules in terms of how they permit, how long they permit, how much water they'll permit. That one's running into some trouble over in the House, but it is moving. Contracting bills. There's a lot of these this session as well. I would say a lot of them are less than good. Probably a nice way for me to put it. We don't really particularly like all of them. Some of the ones that stand out the most are limits on retainage. There's versions of this bill that limit retainage to anywhere from 3 to 5%. That's much lower than we tend to do, so we're not particularly fond of that one. House Bill 1999 is probably one of these that has the best chance of passing. It's the right to repair bill. It basically says that you have to give a contractor the ability or the right to repair defects before you take them to court. So there's a chance that that one may get there. It passed out of the House this past week, so it's over in the Senate. Contingency fees for legal services. The statutes are proposed. I probably should have taken that one off. That one's not going to move. But contingency fee for legal services. This is one that sets up this really complex and difficult process for an entity to enter into a contingency fee for legal services. You have to have an agenda item, a public vote, provide a justification as to why you can't do the service in-house. Basically, it has your legal team have to get up here and say why they're inept at being able to do their jobs and why they need to hire somebody on a contingency basis. It's a really long, drawn-out process. It is mainly directed at school districts that are being solicited by trial lawyers to hire them on a contingency fee basis. It's not really directed at us, but we're a public entity, so we're caught up in it. So we're watching that one. This one right here we actually just talked about in our policies. Right now, we have to go to the comptroller and get approval for a contingency fee for legal services. This moves that approval process over to the Attorney General, so it's fine. It just changes who we have to send it to. And I do think that one has a very good chance of passing as well, because the comptroller requested it. Public information bills, several of these this session. Trying to think of probably the biggest one that really matters for us. Disclosure of contracting information, that's trying to deal with the Supreme Court case where public entities were trying to claim proprietary nature of things in order to keep it from disclosure, so it opens up a little bit of that. We would be required to divulge more information, even if the private entity that we were contracting with didn't want us to. The law would require us to. So there are private folks that aren't particularly very happy with that one, but it is moving. And then public information held on private devices. That's kind of a big one. It really does, kind of stipulate that the information held on a private device, even if it's a current or former employee, is public information, and the public can access it, and it sets up a process for us to have to go get it if that were to happen. It's a pretty difficult process, but it's one that we would have to go through if that bill passes and we're required to get that kind of information. The one thing that bill does do is it allows you to designate an email address or a public address through which all of your public info requests have to come. And if they don't come through there, then you don't have to deal with them. I guess that's just an efficiency thing. We already pretty much do that. Most of ours come through. We have a button on our website that allows you to submit a public info request. So I don't know that that'll really change too much for us, but we'll see. Open meetings bills. I only put 25, 27 up here for fun. They're starting to require video and audio of water district public meetings. This is something that we've done for years. We obviously live feed on YouTube, but there are a lot of entities that don't. And so again, whenever we did it, we kind of made it very clear that this is the way of the future. We need to go ahead and get ready for this. And obviously it's starting to happen that they're going to require it for most, if not all, public districts. And then the walking quorum bill, we sent an email out about this to you all. Whenever the walking quorum provision of the statute, that's when members meet in numbers less than a quorum to circumvent the open meetings law. It was struck down by the Supreme Court saying it was too vague. There are two bills to try to make it less vague. I would tell you that they are pretty prescriptive in what they're trying to say the new walking quorum law will be. I do think that's probably going to pass. I don't know that it changes anything for us because we do everything we can to not violate that law as it existed already. We didn't think that it was unconstitutionally vague, really. I mean, we thought it was pretty clear. You just try not to do it and you won't have a problem. So I don't think that'll change anything for us. Lobby bills. These are fun. House Bill 281 prohibits expenditure of public money for lobbying activities by entities that impose ad valorem taxes. So that one does not affect us. It is for taxing entities, at least it is as it exists right now. Senate Bill 29 is very upsetting to me specifically because it basically says you can't expend public money for lobbying activities that includes employing someone whose job it is to lobby the legislature. That one hits kind of close to home, guys. I guess there's always Barber College. I guess, I don't know. That one passed out of the Senate. We'll see what it does in the House. I do think if it does move, it'll have a lot of exceptions put into it that, kind of change the nature of it and make it a little bit less troublesome. And then another one that I do think has a really good chance of passing is it requires you to take a separate vote whenever you adopt your budget on your expenditures for lobbying. So you'd have to have a separate line item. So you'd adopt your budget, and either before or after that, you'd have a separate line item laying out whatever you spend on contract for lobbying services.
Is that public?
Yes. And oddly enough, on 29 and 281, what's also interesting is not only they prohibit the political subdivision from spending money on lobbying activity, they prohibit you from joining an association that's job is to lobby. So think TML, Texas Association of Counties. So that's what they're looking at with that. And a lot of this, just to be real candid, even though we're on YouTube, a lot of this is related to the public entities pushback on the tax stuff. That there's a lot of unhappiness, and so we'd like for you not to be able to do that anymore, and so you're seeing a lot of these bills move. Eminent domain, also a very busy session for this. Probably the two biggies that are the highlight eminent domain bills are House Bill 991 and Senate Bill 421. The thing about these as they relate to us is that they don't relate to us. These are for private entities. So think oil and gas pipeline companies and their use of eminent domain. So as they are drafted currently, now there's been some versions of them that brought in public entities like us, but we were taken out. They do not really apply to us as they exist today. We watch these things because eminent domain isn't something that we want to use. It's not something we use very often, but if they make changes to them, we need to make sure that we comply. Probably another big one that might affect us because we could acquire property with the idea of using it much later is how you establish actual progress before you have to sell that property back to who it was acquired from via eminent domain. They're increasing the requirements for that, so you can't just get property and hold on to it forever. You have to spend money on it. You have to go after permits. There's a whole host of things that you have to do to prove that you're going to use that property versus just take it and hold on to it. Again, I would say from the standpoint of the legislative negotiations on this, it's really, really crowded space, meaning that we're watching it. Are we engaged in the day-to-day discussions? No, because the larger entities and particularly the private companies are very engaged on these issues. So we're going to watch and see what they come up with.
How is the 991 and 421, is that somewhat slanted at high-speed rail?
A little bit. There's some of that. Yep. Last but not least, well, nobody cares about this one, right? The Allens Creek bill. So we passed out of the House 143-5. We were over in the Senate, sat for a week or so, which is pretty normal, and we were referred to committee last Wednesday. We are expecting to get a hearing relatively quickly, hopefully in the next week or so. Don't know the exact day. And then we'll just kind of see what our chances are in the Senate. I think we're going to have a little bit more of a difficult time there because, there's some more personalities to deal with. So we'll just see. But, the thing that I would tell you on bills like this is momentum swings. It goes back and forth. We've had a lot of momentum in our favor, recently. We'll see if that continues. It might change. But, I'm cautiously optimistic that, we have a really good chance of getting something done. Our goal in all of this, even though a lot of this has been led by the industry folks who want to use this water, is that, we've been really consistent that we don't want to leave the session with nothing. Okay, so, we can't go back to the way that it was because that'll delay the project even further than it's already been delayed. So hopefully we'll get something done. We'll keep y'all posted on that one. Be happy to answer any questions. If I don't have any more slides, but I don't think I do. Oh, that's it.
Do you have a question down
Yes,
here?
sir.
Back on page 4, we talked about groundwater regulation.
Mhm.
Could you elaborate just a little, who's being regulated there?
So a lot of these bills are to, for lack of a better term, control some of the ability that the legislature has given groundwater districts to regulate groundwater. I think there's the thought that the state has vested the regulation of groundwater in these local districts, but that some of them have done more than they should in terms of regulating the resource. And in many cases, according to some, it's not an opinion I share, but regulated it too much or too little or just too differently across the board. And so it's seeking to try to create some sort of consistency in how they can and can't regulate the resource.
Okay, so if our local irrigation district, could they be overridden by this law?
No. This would apply to local groundwater districts, and it's only districts that manage and regulate groundwater. So it's not irrigation districts or special utility districts or us or any of those. So it's just GCDs.
Okay.
So, but if that district is a groundwater regulation district, then yes, it would apply to them.
How might that affect the SAWS, the San Antonio water permit that they already have in there? Building pipelines?
Probably wouldn't, because most of the changes in these regulations apply to permits that were issued on or after the effective date of the bill. So most of what's in existence right now wouldn't be affected by this. It would be for future permits. But to the extent that they have a transport permit in addition to an operations permit, some of this would apply to them probably to their benefit, and then it would allow their transport permit to be extended for as long as their operations permit.
Matt, we appreciate all the hard work. I expect that we will come this summer and you will tell us how we can move forward with Allen's Creek.
I hope so too.
Have confidence.
I hope so. We'll see.
All right. See no other comments or questions. We're going to move on to number 16, report and possible discussion on capital improvement project. Update by Chuck Wolf, Technical Services Manager.
Chairman, number 16 is a report only, no action. So to save time, if we have any questions, we can address it on 16. If not, we can move forward.
Are there any questions, anybody? All right, moving on to agenda item 17, report and possible discussion on risk-based capital management. Update by Chuck Wolf, Technical Services Manager.
Same thing, in the process of saving time, this was a report only that we will bring back to you on a quarterly basis, so we'll take any questions.
Any questions or comments? All right, moving on to agenda number 18, report and possible discussion on fiscal year 2019 second quarter budget report by David Thompson, Chief Financial Officer.
Okay, this is our standard second quarter report of numbers. In your details of the financial statements were included in your package from last week, but I'm just give you some of the highlights here. And the first slide really just takes a look at the three graphical main parts of our financial statements, where revenue is $6 million over budget, and that's due to additional water sales, mainly interruptible water that was not in our budget. Expenses are $3 million under, and that's basically due to the Corps of Engineers underspending, and across most of the departments, we had underspending as well. Projects, which is the largest one, we had a $19 million, we're projecting a $19 million variance, and that's mainly due to the timing difference on Allen's Creek. Here's just the detailed financial statements. And I've already discussed with you the variances. And this is how we spent the money during through the second quarter. That is all I have for that agenda item. Is there any questions?
Any questions or comments? All right, moving on to agenda item 19, report and possible discussion on fiscal year 2019, second quarter investment officer's report by David Thompson, Chief Financial Officer.
Okay, this is an investment report is required by Public Funds Investment Act, and I give it to the report each quarter to the board. The first slide really just takes a look at, whoops, went too fast. Just a trend of the last 2 years' trends. We ended the quarter at 122 million. We're down from 125 million. And these are invested in maturities. These are the maturity blocks of our CD investments. And you can see if you look at the numbers pretty much from 6 months out to about 15 months, we're earning about 275 basis points or 2.75 or greater. We have seen where the Fed has made a decision not to raise rates in 2019, that these rates on our solicitations have actually come down. They're down around 2.65. So they were hedging before the banks were, and now they've pulled back some of the rates. So we've got some really good rates laddered out here, and we'll earn some good money off that for those periods. And this just shows our overall performance is 263 basis points and 2.6%, and that's outbeating the Texas Pool and Treasury, which we use as measurements against our performance. And do I have any questions or?
Questions or comments?
You're quite welcome.
Okay, agenda item 20, report and possible discussion on fiscal year 2020 strategic plan and financial forecast by Jim Forte, Planning and Development Manager, and David Thompson, Chief Financial Officer.
From my perspective, in this part of the presentation, this is just a reminder. In your diligent package, you received a copy of our strategic plan, a detailed copy. Mission statement, guiding principles here, and our goals. What we do is solicit any input that you might have between now and the July board meeting. We are also reviewing the plan internally for any edits that we feel are appropriate. Objectives and strategies will primarily reflect what's in the proposed budget, so that we keep those activities consistent and concurrent with what's in the strategic plan. And then at the July meeting, when you adopt the budget, we'll also ask you to re-adopt the strategic plan. So that's all I've got. Unless anybody has some questions.
Okay, at this time of the year, I bring to you the preliminary budget, and the reason we do this is to give you an idea to take a look at what we're preparing for our 2020 budget, because we come back in July for you to adopt it. So we prepared some of the numbers to show what the rates are going to look like, and then if you have questions, you get back with Mr. Collinsworth or myself. We'll be more than happy to answer any questions you might have about the budget. First, the obvious thing is that we do have the system operations permit number in our 2020 budget. It's a little over $7 million that Jim talked about. Some of the expenses that we have that are between 19 and 20 is we have about a 5% increase due to employees for their employee cost index, as well as their merit pool. The Corps of Engineers did come in at $6.7 million. We do pay for the core lakes that we have out there. 1.3 million of the 6.7 is going to go to the repair replacement reserve projects for Lake Granbury and Stillhouse Hollow Lake.
So the 6.6 is the fee that we pay to store water in federal projects. And then the only other thing I would add, and you don't have to go back a slide, David, but today the lakes are full and the river's flowing, so there's a high probability that going into next fall, we will have interruptible water. But although that revenue is there, we're not going to budget for that revenue.
And then 2020, we have planned the sunset audit, and we put in there $350,000 for that. So these are the three main differences in the O&M expenses between 19 and 20, and later on you'll see that variance. Just give you an idea of some of the capital projects we have. We've talked a little bit about Allen's Creek. We've talked a little bit earlier about the Tainer Gate replacement. Brad talked about the Stillhouse Hollow pipeline, and then Trinity groundwater and some of these other projects we have. In the next, I'll give you full details of all the others, but just for simplicity, I just want to give you the major capital projects we're going to be doing next year.
So let me touch on Allen's Creek real quick, David. When we created this, we were in flux between what a piece of legislation may look like. So this was moving forward, not with BRA paying $23 million in full ownership of the reservoir. Obviously, if that happens, we're going to have budget amendments, and we'll come back to the board with some approval for agreements, approval to buy the reservoir, and we'll update the budget at that time. But that will come out of reserves and shouldn't impact what the system rate looks like for next year.
And these are our operating projects. Now, operating projects are different than capital projects because these projects do not build out capital infrastructure. They're studies, they're assessments, they could be IT equipment, they could be software, they can actually be repairs. And so with these expense, we do put that into our operating expenses that go into our system rate. So now taking a look at just the 5-year plan that we have. Now the FY 2019 is our current projection that we have. So as you can see, our current projection, we talked a little bit about the capital projects, not spending the 27 million. So we've already factored that in, and that's when you end up with a working capital of about 87 million. And what David was saying about the capital in 2020, we'll end up about $56 million. So we will have quite a bit of working capital in the 2020 time period. We also are looking at starting getting some bond proceeds in 2021. And these numbers here do reflect some of the big numbers we're talking about with Allen's Creek.
And for those of you that are new, both at the customer meeting and in the July board workshop for the budget, we'll go into a lot more of these projects in detail. We just wanted to give you a flair for what the big numbers look like.
Sure.
In our water rate increase, will we be able to allocate the cost of water during the spending of all this money on Allen's Creek, or have to wait until there's actual water available?
We've actually, when we did the long-range plan for the rates themselves, we've encompassed selling the Allen Creek water when it is completed and able to be sold. So in our rates, I've got probably projected out through 2030, something like that.
So it's going to be a steady, and I've seen that before, so that accounted for that.
It's covered with 500.
All right, thank you.
Now, this is a busy slide, but I just want to show you, here's our rates, and we're talking about going to $79 for FY 2020. These numbers are the numbers I've shown even last year to the board, as well as to our customers. And they've gotten very comfortable with the fact of this progression. This progression also does cover, as we go out further, in the 3 to 4% to encompass things like Peter was talking about, Allen's Creek, Tater Gates, and whatnot. There is a balancing act that we have to do between what we have to have in debt coverage. The 1.3 is set by the board, but I do, in the forecast, I'm trying to basically keep the numbers above. It doesn't make any difference, but as long as we meet the debt coverage, we're good. The reserves we have here are our board-set reserves. The main one we have that the bond rating group looks at is the 90-day working capital. And as you can see, between the numbers here versus the numbers I'm running down here, we have plenty of money to cover over the 90-day working capital. So this just takes a look at what's changed between FY19 and 20 and setting the rates from $76.50 to $79. I've already talked a little bit about the differences for the O&M expenses. This is the operating projects, which is in the system rate, and it did increase by $5 million. We did use $1.8 million in rate stabilization reserve last year. We're now adding back $640, meaning we're kind of, with the SysOps water, we're able to now not be using the rate stabilization reserve at this time. So we're talking about a 3.3% increase in rate that will be taken out to the customer meetings. There's one thing that was brought to the board last year, and that is that our financing that we do for some of our customers, we use a rate of 2.53, which is the amount of money that we recover from our investments. We went out to our finance consultants for our bonds, and if we went out to borrow money today from the bonds, we'd be at 4%. So in the next, when we come to adopt the policy, I'm going to recommend that we go to 4%, because that's how much money we would borrow and not recover from our investments. I think that's fair that we get back our money for that. Is there any questions or concern on that? Good. Oh, by the way, this really impacts maybe one or two customers, which is our big utility companies, so we're not going to be going after any smaller customers that big impact. So what's left, we still meet with all our cost reimbursable customers, finalize their budget, and then like David said, we're going to be going out to do meetings with our customers and discuss them in more detail with the rates. And then once we do all that, pull all that back together, we'll finalize the budget and bring that back to you in July. Any questions?
Any questions, comments? All right, so I want to thank everybody for their support during this long agenda, my first one as board chair, so thank you very much. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn at this time. Nobody?
No move.
Director Bennett and Director Henderson.
Let's go. Let's do that surplus thing again.
All in favor? There's no other business. We will adjourn the meeting at?
Oh, I don't know. 2:47.
2:47.